Chapter 399. Early in the morning was the peak time for breakfast. Jinshin carried the white tiger to the largest restaurant in the center of the town with the 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire. The 6 of them occupied a large round table, which was filled with the most expensive breakfast dishes in the restaurant. The white tiger lay on the table, wolfing down a large plate of delicious barbecued beef that Jinshin had ordered for it. It whimpered excitedly from time to time, attracting the curious gazes of the customers in the restaurant. Jinshin sat at the table with a heavy heart, listening to the discussions around him. He had no appetite at all. The Qingan Kingdom was very close to the Kingdom of Jessin, so they could obtain the most accurate information about the war in the Kingdom of Jessin. To the mercenaries who often roamed the Tianyuan continent, not only did the news spread very quickly, it was also more reliable. The Kingdom of Jessin is most likely done for this time. The 4 palaces have over 2,000 soldiers in total. How can the Kingdom of Jessin stop the allied army of the 4 empires with only a few million soldiers? The territory that the Jessin Kingdom occupies is the most fertile area in this region, and it has long since attracted the envy of the surrounding kingdoms. Although the Kingdom of Jessin has managed to hold on for a few months with their sturdy fortresses, the continuous battles have depleted their forces far too much. I heard that the Kingdom of Jessin only has 1 million soldiers left from the original 6 million soldiers. The entire kingdom is now urgently recruiting more soldiers. The Kingdom of Jessin only has around 200 intermediate crystal cannons to support them. I heard that they don't have enough monster cores anymore. Even a large amount of monster cores stored in the national treasury has been used up. The monster cores used to fire the crystal cannons are all donated by the various factions in the kingdom. Half a month ago, a dozen intermediate crystal cannons of the Kingdom of Jessin self-destructed because they were used too often. They blasted a few large holes in the fortresses, resulting in the deaths of over 1,000 people. The Kingdom of Jessin is far too weak compared to the allied army of the 4 empires. Even if the Kingdom of Jessin were to gather all the soldiers and mercenaries they hired, they would not have more than 3 million soldiers. On the other hand, the allied army of the 4 empires has over 10 million soldiers and twice as many peak experts as the Kingdom of Jessin. The Kingdom of Jessin is doomed this time. I heard that 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the Kingdom of Jessin died 7 days ago. 3 of them were heavily injured. On the other hand, only 1 Heaven Saint Master from the allied army was on the verge of death. I heard that he was saved by a Radiant Saint Master in the end. The rest of them only suffered some injuries of varying severity. There weren't many losses. Jinshin's face became more and more solemn as he listened to the news. Although the situation was not as bad as it seemed, the Kingdom of Jessin was not in a good situation. The difference in strength was just too great. You don't know about this. I just returned from the Flaming Kingdom 3 days ago. I heard that there was a Heaven Saint Master from the Kingdom of Jessin who was extremely powerful. He fought against 6 Heaven Saint Masters from the allied army by himself. Although he was heavily injured in the end, he used a shocking Heaven-tier battle skill to kill 2 Heaven Saint Masters and heavily injure 3 others. In the end, the Heaven Saint Masters of the allied army all lost their courage to continue fighting and fled miserably. Yeah, I've heard about this as well. I heard that the powerful Heaven Saint Master used to keep a very low profile in the Kingdom of Jessin. He wasn't even ranked among the 10 great experts. Very few people know of his existence. I think his name is Chong Wuji or something. At this moment, a few more travel-worn mercenaries walked in from outside. Hearing the discussions of the crowd, the leader immediately said, "That's nothing. That Chong Wuji's strength must have reached the peak. Otherwise, it's impossible for him to possess such battle prowess." Let me tell you something even more shocking. In the battle 3 days ago, an Earth Saint Master heavily injured a peak Heaven Saint Master from the Blue Wind Kingdom. That's impossible. How can an Earth Saint Master be the opponent of a Heaven Saint Master? I don't believe it. Who are you trying to fool? Everyone in the restaurant snorted disdainfully. They didn't believe the mercenaries' words at all. I'm not lying to you. I heard that the Earth Saint Master even knew a Heaven-tier battle skill. He used it to heavily injure a Heaven Saint Master. If it weren't for a Heaven Saint Master from the Four-Nation Alliance who saved him in time, that Heaven Saint Master probably would have been killed in a single strike. TSK, TSK. That scene was so spectacular. Once the Heaven Tier battle skill was used, the weather changed and a thick layer of dark clouds gathered in the sky. The ground was covered in sand and rocks, making it impossible to see anything clearly. I heard that the Earth Saint Master's Heaven Tier battle skill directly caused a violent earthquake. The earth shook and the mountains shook. It almost collapsed the fortress of the kingdom of Jessen. Everyone was stunned by the Earth Saint Master's battle prowess. No wonder I felt the ground shake 3 days ago. It can't be real, right? That's just too terrifying. This place is at least 1,000 kilometers away from the fortress of the kingdom of Jessen. How can it be so far away? The earthquake caused by a Heaven Tier battle skill can actually reach so far away. That's just too ridiculous. The man continued, that's not all. I heard that the Earth Saint Master is wind-attributed Saint Force. His speed is unbelievably fast. He's basically a monster. He managed to contend with a Heaven Saint Master for half a day with just his speed alone. 2 Heaven Saint Masters tried to hunt him down, but he managed to escape easily. His speed is just too monstrous. It can't be that powerful. Is he really an Earth Saint Master? The people in the restaurant all paled. The Earth Saint Master was just far too powerful. Hearing the discussions, Jinshin couldn't help but reveal a faint smile. He had already guessed that the Earth Saint Master with unimaginable speed and a Heaven Tier battle skill was definitely Ming Dong. The man obviously knew a lot of the latest news. He proudly continued, the death of 2 Heaven Saint Masters is something that the 4 countries can't accept. 2 days ago, the 4 countries sent an army of 2 million to attack the northern fortress of the kingdom of Jessen. The battle lasted for an entire day and night, and blood flowed like rivers. Corpses piled up like mountains. Now, the northern fortress of the kingdom of Jessen is in tatters. Even the tempered steel gate has been deformed. Both sides have suffered countless casualties. I heard that a Heaven Saint Master from the kingdom of Pingyang even captured a general alive and chopped off his arms and legs. He's been hanging on the fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang for an entire day. That's just too cruel. Don't tell me that the kingdom of Pingyang has some sort of deep grudge with that general. Is there a need to do this when they have the upper hand? Both his arms and legs have been chopped off. That general must be a famous general. Everyone in the inn was discussing animatedly. The information brought by this burly man was the latest news, which attracted everyone's attention. The man chuckled and shook his head. You've guessed wrong. That general isn't some famous general. Instead, he's an unknown commander. I think his name is Chang Yang-hu, and he's only a major general. As soon as the man finished speaking, Jianshan, who was eating breakfast not far away, suddenly trembled. His face suddenly changed and turned pale. His body turned into a shadow and arrived in front of the man in an instant. His slender fingers tightly grabbed the man's collar and lifted him up from the bench. He shouted, "What did you just say?" Whose arms and legs were chopped off and are hanging on the fortress wall. Jinshin's eyes were red and sharp. "Bastard, you're courting death." The man was also a hot-tempered man. He immediately flew into a rage and roared. His hands were about to grab Jinshin's neck. "Speak!" Jinshin roared like an enraged lion. The entire restaurant trembled slightly with his roar. At that moment, his eyes became extremely sharp. They shone like lightning, stabbing deeply into the man's eyes like a sword. It made the man's eyes hurt. Just his gaze alone was enough to make the man not dare to look him in the eye. At the same time, an extremely powerful killing intent radiated from Jinshin. It soared into the sky, making everyone in the restaurant feel like they had fallen into an ice cavern. They felt cold from head to toe. The noisy inn immediately fell silent. Everyone stared at the furious Jian-chun in shock. They remained where they were as they trembled, not daring to move at all. Just from this aura, everyone present knew that this young man in front of them possessed a terrifyingly powerful strength. The man who had been grabbed by the collar by Jianshan was scared silly. He no longer had the arrogance from before. His face was extremely pale, and he trembled all over. The killing intent radiating from Jinshin was overwhelming. It was extremely powerful, making the man feel like he could not breathe at all. It was as if he was about to suffocate to death. Don T kill me. WW, what do you want to know? I'll tell you everything I know. The man finally lost his temper. His face was filled with fear, and his voice trembled. Jinshin gave him the feeling of an inviolable god of death. It made him tremble from the bottom of his soul. Jinshin stared at the man with an extremely sharp gaze. He did not hide the intense, killing intent in his eyes at all. He roared furiously. Who has his arms and legs cut off and is hanging on the wall? If you dare to lie to me, I'll make sure you die a horrible death. Jinshin practically roared out the last sentence. His eyes were already slightly bloodshot. Chapter 400. After receiving confirmation, Jinshin's expression became extremely gloomy. The murderous aura that radiated from his body quickly spread out from the inn and enveloped the entire street. Everyone on the street couldn't help but shrink their necks. They felt as if the temperature between heaven and earth had suddenly dropped to a few dozen degrees below zero. Not only did they feel cold all over, but even their souls were trembling. The 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire who came with Jinshin looked at each other and saw a trace of shock and astonishment in each other's eyes. The murderous aura radiating from Jinshin was so strong that it made all 5 of them feel extremely frightened. Big brother, there was a faint red color in Jinshin's eyes, as if there was blood condensing in them. He murmured in a low voice and then threw the burly man out. His figure flashed, and he was already out of the inn. Then a surge of wind element madly rushed toward him and wrapped around his body. His body quickly rose into the air. A faint green light flashed and then disappeared. Jinshin flew into the distance at lightning speed and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Lord Imperial Protector. The Imperial advisors of the Qin Empire shouted one after another. They all stood up from their seats and looked extremely serious. When they saw Jinshin's expression and thought about what the burly man had said, they all guessed that the person who had his hands and feet cut off must have a close relationship with Lord Imperial Protector. The 5 of you immediately depart and assist the Kingdom of Jessen in fighting against the allied forces of the 4 empires. Protect everyone in Chanyang Prefecture. Jinshin's voice sounded in the ears of the 5 imperial advisors. His voice was extremely cold. Jinshin's voice transmission stunned the 5 imperial advisors. Their eyes were filled with shock. The 5 of them looked at each other, and Xiaotian, who was the strongest among them, said, "Let's go. We'll all go to the Kingdom of Jessen." Woo woo woo. Woo 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 woo. Jinshin's sudden departure made the white tiger very sad. He couldn't care less about the delicious barbecued beef on the table. He jumped down from the table and turned into a white shadow as he ran to the entrance of the inn. He looked at the sky with watery eyes and kept howling. His voice was filled with desolation, as if he was a child who had been heartlessly abandoned by his mother. He looked very pitiful and pitiful. Looking at the pitiful appearance of the white tiger, the 5 Qin Empire's imperial advisors couldn't bear to see him like this. Xiaotian gently walked forward and cradled the white tiger in his arms. He then turned around and said to the others, "Let's go." Then, the 5 Qin Empire's imperial advisors walked out of the inn and directly flew into the air. They disappeared into the sky, leaving behind the stunned people in the inn. Jinshin's body was wrapped in a thick layer of wind-attributed Saint Force. His entire body emitted a strong layer of pale green light. Even in the daytime, he was very eye-catching. Now, he had raised his speed to the limit and hurriedly flew towards the border fortress of the Kingdom of Pingyang. In Jinshin's mind, he couldn't help but recall the scenes of him and his elder brother, Changyang Hu. In Jinshin's heart, Changyang Hu was definitely a family member that he couldn't forget. Although his elder brother didn't help him much in the past at Kargath Academy, and he even helped his elder brother a lot, his elder brother Changyang Hu's care for him came from the bottom of his heart. At that time, Changyang Hu was the 4th person in Jinshin's heart besides his parents and Changyang Mingwei. Although Jinshin had wandered outside for a few years, he was still the same old Jinshin. His temperament hadn't changed much. Those family members of the past were still the biggest concern in Jinshin's heart. Elder brother, you can't let anything happen to you. Otherwise, I, Jinshin, swear that I will raze the kingdom of Pingyang to the ground and let the 4 allied countries accompany you in death. Jinshin's face was incomparably gloomy. His eyes were faintly bloodshot. That strong killing intent was enough to make people tremble in fear. The kingdom of Jessin was surrounded by 6 other kingdoms. The Qiangan kingdom, the Pingyang kingdom, and the kingdom of Jessin were all connected in a triangle. Jinshin flew away from the border fortress of the Qiangan kingdom and followed the directions on the map for 2 hours. After crossing over 3,000 kilometers, he finally arrived at the border fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang. From afar, the huge fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang appeared in Jinshin's mind. The 80-meter-tall walls were filled with stern-looking soldiers. Currently, the fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang had gathered over 2 million soldiers. Looking from the sky, just the tents alone stretched for several kilometers. There were even large tents set up outside the fortress. Groups of patrolling soldiers shuttled through the tents. The vanguard of the kingdom of Pingyang had already gathered over 1 million soldiers outside the northern fortress of the kingdom of Jessin. Although they were all attacking the northern fortress of the kingdom of Jessin, the 2 million soldiers here were all reserve troops. If the front line needed them, they could be sent over at any time. Jinshin stopped a dozen kilometers away from the kingdom of Pingyang. His eyes were filled with pain as he looked ahead. His body, that was 1,000 meters in the air, was also trembling. 15 kilometers away, a man with severed arms and legs was hung on the wall of a fortress. His clothes were dyed red with blood, and he looked like a bloody man. His long hair was tied up with a thick hemp rope, and his body was hung on the wall. Although they were a dozen kilometers apart, Jinshin's divine sense could clearly see the other party's appearance. That familiar face, wasn't it his elder brother, Changyanghu? A few years had passed, and Changyanghu hadn't changed much. However, at this moment, his face was as pale as a sheet of paper. His eyes were tightly shut, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Seeing his elder brother, Changyanghu, in such a pitiful state, Jinshin's eyes were bloodshot. 2 streaks of blood flowed down from his eyes. His body, that was suspended in the air, was trembling violently. It was as if he couldn't control himself and was about to fall from the sky. In the past, he had thought more than once about how much shock and joy he would bring to his few relatives when he returned home and saw them. In the past, he had thought more than once about what expression his elder brother, Changyanghu, would have when he returned to Kargath Academy and saw his current strength. However, he had never thought that when he returned home with such great achievements and met his elder brother, Changyanghu, he would be met with such a heart-wrenching tragedy. It was a scene that he couldn't accept. Elder brother, Jinshin let out a sorrowful cry. His eyes instantly turned red. An extremely strong, killing intent gushed out from his body like a huge wave, dispersing the clouds. Then, Jinshin's figure turned into a green light and rushed to the top of the fortress wall at a speed that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. The 2 million soldiers in the fortress of the Pingyang kingdom were all alarmed. The soldiers who were resting in their tents all crawled out and looked up at the sky. With a dignified expression, they stared at Jinshin, who was flying over. Boom, 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 boom. The dull sound of war drums came from the top of the fortress. The sound was very urgent, indicating that a great enemy was about to invade. The whole city was on alert. On top of the fortress wall, a middle-aged man wearing armor walked out from the tower. Seeing Jinshin flying over, his face suddenly became very dignified. He shouted, "Release the crossbows." As soon as his voice fell, the sound of air breaking could be heard one after another. Huge crossbows as thick as an arm shot towards Jinshin with ear-piercing sounds. Jinshin's eyes faintly flashed with purple light. When those crossbows shot out for a few kilometers, their speed suddenly decreased greatly. Soon, they were suspended in the air. Then, under the shocked gaze of all the soldiers below, all the crossbows actually slowly changed direction in the air. Then, a layer of hazy purple light suddenly flashed. Every crossbow arrow with a faint purple light suddenly shot back towards the fortress. The expression of the general who was standing on top of the fortress wall changed greatly. However, before he could give any orders, the reverse crossbows shot towards the fortress wall at a speed that was much faster than when they were shot. Boom, 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 boom. Following a series of violent explosions, numerous holes appeared on the sturdy fortress wall, stirring up a large cloud of dust. Countless soldiers were pierced through the chest, and several towers immediately collapsed. At this time, Jinshin had already arrived in front of Chanyang Hu. He cut off the hemp rope that was hanging Chanyang Hu with an incomparably sorrowful expression. His eyes were filled with tears of blood, and he held Chanyang Hu's body very carefully in his arms. Big brother. Looking at the unconscious Chanyang Hu, Jinshin's face was filled with grief. Now, his big brother had almost become a cripple. He was unable to accept this fact. Jinshin hurriedly took out a few radiant spirit pills from his space ring that he had obtained during the elimination round of the mercenary tournament and fed them all to Chanyang Hu to save his life. Although Chanyang Hu was not dead, his situation was extremely terrible. He had lost too much blood, and his life was hanging by a thread. The general standing on top of the fortress wall immediately took out a precious jade from his space ring and crushed it before leaping off the wall and disappearing. With his strength as an Earth Saint Master, he was basically powerless in front of the Heaven Saint Master. The only way he could survive was to flee. Release the arrows, shoot him down. The soldiers below all began to yell out. They all drew their bows and aimed at Jinshin. Arrows shot towards Jinshin like moths to a flame, blotting out the sun. The killing intent in Jinshin's eyes had already reached its peak. At this moment, his eyes suddenly turned purple as a powerful mental force permeated the surroundings. Before the arrows shot towards Jinshin could even approach Jinshin's body, they all stopped in the air. Afterwards, they changed directions and shot toward the soldiers below at an even faster speed. Immediately, miserable cries rang out from below as the densely packed soldiers collapsed in droves. With their strength, it was impossible for them to survive after being pierced by the arrows with Azulite sword chi. Jinshin controlled the tens of thousands of arrows to shoot through the crowd below, mercilessly slaughtering the soldiers below. In just a few short breaths, not a single one of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers stationed outside the fortress was spared. Afterwards, the tens of thousands of arrows under Jinshin's control quickly condensed into a huge sword that was several dozen meters long in front of Jinshin. It shot towards the fortress with lightning speed. Chapter 401. Boom! With a loud boom, the giant sword formed by tens of thousands of iron arrows fiercely bombarded the sturdy fortress walls. The fortified walls that had been strengthened countless times and had enough defensive power to withstand the bombardment of magic crystal cannons instantly became as fragile as tofu. A huge hole with a diameter of over 30 meters was blasted out of the wall. This scene caused the millions of soldiers in the fortress to turn pale with fright. The soldiers who were closer to the fortress hurriedly fled in all directions to avoid being hit by the falling rocks. Jinshin's eyes had completely turned into a purplish-green color with a hint of scarlet. His voice was extremely gloomy as he said, "Today, I will destroy this fortress. The kingdom of Pingyang, I, Jinshin, will make you pay a heavy price." Towards the end, Jinshin said each word with a pause. Every word was squeezed out from between his teeth. The hatred in his heart had already reached an extreme, enveloping an area of over 10 kilometers, causing the temperature of the area to rapidly drop. Boom! Another thunderous sound rang out. The giant sword formed by tens of thousands of iron arrows carried with it the power to destroy the heavens and earth as it fiercely bombarded the sturdy stronghold. A huge hole appeared in the stronghold. The 30-meter-wide stronghold was completely penetrated. Suddenly, a few long whistles rang out from afar, accompanied by a powerful presence that filled the area. For figures could be seen flying over from the back of the fortress. Jinshin's entire body radiated with a cold, killing intent. His gaze was extremely sharp as he stared at the four heaven saint masters flying over from the fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang. The huge sword formed by tens of thousands of arrows carried a faint purplish-green light as it streaked across the sky like a meteor, shooting towards the four heaven saint masters with lightning speed. The four heaven saint masters of the kingdom of Pingyang roared in unison. The four of them simultaneously sent out a powerful sword chi to collide with a huge sword formed by tens of thousands of arrows. When the two collided, a violent boom resounded through the sky. It was like a bolt from the blue. The sound was terrifying. The powerful ripples of energy formed a multicolored cloud that rapidly spread out in all directions. Countless soldiers below were blown away by the shockwave formed by the shockwave. They immediately spat out blood and were heavily injured. There were even quite a few soldiers who were enveloped by the shockwave that directly shattered their internal organs, dying an unnatural death. In a battle between Heaven Saint Masters, just a shockwave from the battle was enough to kill a large number of people. If they were too close, even Earth Saint Masters would find it difficult to protect themselves. The fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang was blown over by the shockwave. A 300-meter-long wall was blown over, burying a large number of soldiers. Even the surrounding walls began to shake as they were heavily damaged. The combined attack of 5 Heaven Saint Masters was just too powerful. Even Jian Shen's huge sword, which was tens of meters long, was shattered by the combined attack of the 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom. A moment later, the violent shockwave finally dissipated. Jian Shen hovered in the air, with only the middle part of Chanyang, whose body still in his arms. His face was terrifyingly gloomy. On the other side, the 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the Kingdom of Pingyang had also arrived 100 meters away from Jianshan. They hovered in the air and stared at Jianshan with sharp gazes. However, when they saw Jianshan's appearance that was at most in his 20s, they were all shocked. Their faces were filled with disbelief, because Jianshan's age was just too young. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters did not believe that someone could reach such a level at such a young age. One of them coldly snorted, "Humph." Most likely he used the special envoy's medicine to rejuvenate himself. Hearing this, the other 3 Heaven Saint Masters were also convinced. Then, an old man stared at Jianshan with a sharp gaze and sternly shouted, "Who are you? State your name. Who cut off my big brother's forelimbs?" Jianshan stared at the 4 Heaven Saint Masters with a gloomy face and asked in a deep voice, "What, your big brother?" The 4 Heaven Saint Masters were all extremely shocked. The Chanyang who in Jianshan's arms was the person whose 4 limbs had been cut off. In that case, was Chanyang who not the big brother of his Heaven Saint Master in front of them? This result caused the 4 Heaven Saint Masters to be stunned. They thought they had misheard. Who cut off his 4 limbs? Jianshan continued to ask, his killing intent soaring. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters looked at each other. They were all curious about Jianshan's identity. Immediately, one of them asked, "Sir, just who are you? I don't think I've heard of someone like you." At this moment, another huge aura spread out from the distance. A fiery red dot of light flashed in the distant sky. It was like a meteor streaking across the sky, bringing with it a dazzling red light as it shot towards them. Not long after, the fiery red light stopped 500 meters away, revealing an old man wrapped in fire elemental energy. The person who had come wore a long azure robe and was extremely ordinary. His head of white hair was tied up into a bun on his head. His wrinkled old face was somewhat pale. The old man's gaze quickly swept around. When he saw Chanyang, who in Jianshan's arms with his 4 limbs cut off, his face suddenly changed. His face was filled with grief as he cried out, "Young master!" The 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom all stared at the old man with a serious expression. They all gritted their teeth, and one of them said in a deep voice, "Humph, Chan Wuji, you really did come. You killed 2 of our experts from the Pingyang Kingdom. Today, we will make you accompany them in death." Chang Wuji's eyes were instantly filled with killing intent. He stared at the 4 Heaven Saint Masters with an extremely sharp gaze and said furiously, "You actually cut off the young master's 4 limbs. Good, good, good. This old servant will accompany you to the end." Even if I have to sacrifice my life, I will still kill the four of you. Arrogant. Even with your injured body, you still dare to say such big words. One of the Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom had a look of disdain. He then cupped his hands and said, "Senior Qinyun, please show yourself." His voice was vast and powerful, spreading far and wide. An old man in a white robe flew over from behind. In the end, he stood side by side with the four Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom. The old man had white hair and a ruddy complexion. He had the demeanor of a transcendent being. He gave off the feeling that he was an expert. "Qinyun, I never thought that your Qingan Kingdom would also interfere in this matter. Don't tell me that your Qingan Kingdom is also joining forces with the other four kingdoms to deal with my Kingdom of Jessen?" Chang Wuji's expression became ugly. The current situation was getting worse and worse. If the Qingan Kingdom was included, then it was equivalent to 5 kingdoms attacking the Kingdom of Jessen. He was extremely clear about Qianyun's background. He was a member of the royal family of the Qingan Kingdom. He cultivated in the forbidden grounds of the royal palace and had lived for over 400 years. He was already a 5th cycle Heaven Saint Master, infinitely close to the 6th cycle. He was extremely powerful and was the number 1 expert of the Qingan Kingdom. Qianyun's gaze swept past Chang Wuji before landing on the gloomy Jinshin. He asked softly, "Who is he?" The 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom shook their heads and said, "We don't know who he is either. He should be related to the Kingdom of Jessen." Qianyun stared deeply at Jinshin before shifting his gaze to Chang Wuji. He smiled faintly and said, "Brother Wuji, we haven't seen each other for 100 years. I never thought that your strength would be even greater than before. My Qingan Kingdom did not interfere in this matter. I only came for the Heaven Tier battle skill." "You want my Heaven Tier battle skill?" Chang Wuji asked in a deep voice. "That's right. If Brother Wuji can teach me the Heaven Tier battle skill, Qianyun will immediately retreat." Qianyun said with a smile, "You sure have guts. The Heaven Tier battle skill was taught to me by my master. You actually dare to ask me for it. Aren't you afraid that my master will come back one day and flatten your Qingan Kingdom?" Chang Wuji's expression was extremely ugly. Qianyun's face revealed a trace of fear, but he quickly hid it and laughed. "Chang Wuji, you are still thinking about your master who has been missing for dozens of years. That's right. Ancestor Changyang is indeed very strong. However, you may have forgotten that when he went missing, his lifespan had already reached 900 years. He was almost at the end of his lifespan. Now that there has been no news of him for dozens of years, I'm afraid he has already died. My master is a genius. His battle prowess is unparalleled in the same realm. How can he be stopped by the mysteries of heaven and earth? When he returns one day, he will definitely flatten your Pingyang Kingdom." Chang Wuji furiously shouted. Qianyun sneered. "Chang Wuji, I, Qianyun, am not someone who can be scared. I will still say the same thing. If you teach me the Heaven Tier battle skill, I, Qianyun, will immediately retreat. Don't even think about it. Although this old servant is already heavily injured, killing you all is not a problem." Chang Wuji's body surged out. Although he was heavily injured, his battle intent was high. He was like a fierce tiger, without the slightest trace of fear. On the other side, the 5 Heaven Saint Masters were all prepared for battle. Their sharp eyes stared at Chang Wuji and Jinshin. The battle was about to begin. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded. "Leave them to me. Today, I will flatten the Pingyang Kingdom. I will take the heads of all the experts and hang them on the city walls." The one who spoke was Jinshin. Although his tone was calm, the intense killing intent within was not concealed. The content was even more shocking. "Flatten the Pingyang Kingdom. Take the heads of all the experts and hang them on the city walls." These words had a huge impact on the hearts of the 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang Kingdom. They were all furious. Their sharp eyes stared at Jinshin, emitting a powerful killing intent. One of the Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom shouted, "Ignorant brat, do you really think you are the Changyang ancestor? You want to flatten my Pingyang Kingdom with just the strength of a Heaven Saint Master?" Chang Wuji also looked at Jinshin in surprise. Seeing Chan Yonghu in Jinshin's arms, a trace of doubt appeared on his face. He did not know what kind of relationship this young expert had with Chan Yonghu. He was actually willing to risk offending several Heaven Saint Masters to save Chan Yonghu. Chapter 402. As he spoke, the unconscious Chan Yonghu in Jinshin's arms was wrapped in a layer of gentle wind elemental energy and gently brought to Chan Wuji's side. The violent fire elemental energy around Chan Wuji became gentler, afraid of hurting Chan Yonghu. He then gently embraced Chan Yonghu in his arms as tears glistened in his old eyes. "Young master, it's all my fault." Chan Wuji's lips trembled as he spoke. All of this was because he had used a heaven-tier battle skill to kill 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom. That was why the Pingyang Kingdom held a grudge against him and used Chan Yonghu to take revenge. Now that Chan Yonghu had ended up like this, Chan Wuji's heart ached. He had watched Chan Yonghu grow up. Although they were master and servant, their relationship was closer than family. Now that Chan Yonghu had become a cripple, Chan Wuji did not know how much pain Chan Yongba would feel when he saw his son like this. Chan Wuji's gaze landed on Jinshin again. He suppressed his sorrow and said calmly, "May I know your name? If there is a chance in the future, the Changyang Prefecture will definitely be grateful for your kindness." Jinshin did not reply. Although seeing Chang Bo, who had cared for him in the past, was something to be happy about, because of the tragedy of his brother, Chan Yonghu, Jinshin could not feel happy at all. Instead, he felt so sad that he did not even have the mood to speak. Jinshin glared at the 5 Heaven Saint Masters across from him. His killing intent soared into the sky as he said in a deep voice, "People of the Qiangan Kingdom, do you really want to interfere? It's not too late to retreat." Although Jinshin's aura was extraordinary, Qian Yun was not afraid at all. He said indifferently, "Old man is only here for the heaven-class combat skill. As long as he can get it, it doesn't matter even if the Qiangan Kingdom is dragged into this. After all, the Kingdom of Jessen has no chance of surviving this crisis." Jinshin said solemnly, "All right, I will definitely destroy your Qiangan Kingdom in the future." "Arrogant! Who do you think you are? Not only do you want to destroy the Pingyang Kingdom, but you also want to destroy my Gangan Kingdom." Ganyan laughed instead of getting angry. He didn't take Jinshin's words seriously at all. Jinshin didn't say anything. An intense, purplish-green light flashed in his eyes. At this moment, his eyes had completely turned into a purplish-green color. They flickered with a demonic light and looked incomparably terrifying. Jinshin reached out with his right hand. Countless rocks around the city walls shot up, carrying with them a sword chi that blotted out the sky as they shot towards the 5 Heaven Saint Masters. The 5 Heaven Saint Masters didn't take this attack seriously at all. They all sneered and struck out with their palms. Surging energy shot out from their palms and pressed down on the countless rocks that were flying towards them. The countless rocks that carried with them a faint sword chi broke through the powerful attacks of the Heaven Saint Masters like a hot knife through butter. They shot towards the 5 Heaven Saint Masters like moths to a flame. The faces of the 5 Heaven Saint Masters changed. They immediately became serious. Qian Yun immediately said in a deep voice, "These things are strange. Be careful." After saying that, he took out his saint weapon. It was a long and thin sword. With a wave of his hand, a wave of sword chi shot out and struck the rocks with the sword chi. The rocks were pulverized on the spot, turning into dust that drifted down. The other Heaven Saint Masters didn't slow down either. They also took out their own saint weapons to cut down the rocks that were flying towards them. However, the rocks with the sword chi were just too dense. Many of the rocks broke through their blockade and hit their bodies, piercing through them. The Heaven Saint Masters were shocked. Only at this moment did they truly begin to take this seriously. "Use Saint Force to protect yourself," a Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom immediately shouted. Immediately, a few dense multicolored lights were emitted from their bodies. The surging Saint Force instantly condensed into a barrier that protected their bodies. However, this was still unable to block the attacks of the sword chi. It could only slightly slow down their speed. The five Heaven Saint Masters knew that they couldn't continue like this. They all used their full strength, shattering the rocks around them. Then, they all rushed towards Jianshan. Jianshan raised his hands high above his head. With a thought, countless scattered iron arrows floated up and gathered above his head. At the same time, all the trees within a 15-kilometer radius exploded. The sky was filled with wood shavings covering the sun. In the end, it condensed into a huge sword that was several hundred meters long above Jinshan's head. It pierced through the clouds. From afar, it looked like a towering pillar that supported the heavens. It emitted a hazy purple and green light. What is that? The four Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom and the five Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom all had a change of expression. Their eyes were filled with shock as they looked at the huge sword formed from countless rocks and wood shavings above Jinshan's head. The huge momentum shocked them so much that they couldn't help but stop. Is this a Heaven-tier battle skill? A Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom said with a serious expression. No, it doesn't have the pressure of a Heaven-tier battle skill. This isn't a Heaven-tier battle skill, Yin said with a deep voice. At this time, the huge sword floating above Jinshan's head rapidly shrank. In the end, it turned into a huge sword that was only 100 meters long. It was even more condensed. The countless rocks and wood shavings inside were all compressed together, forming a tight connection. The purple and green light around the huge sword also became stronger. Jinshan angrily roared. The huge sword floating above his head suddenly chopped down with an inconceivable speed, enveloping the five Heaven Saint Masters within. The five Heaven Saint Masters all had a serious expression. They all shouted loudly and simultaneously used high-level Earth-tier battle skills to resist. Boom! A violent explosion reverberated through the sky. The violent energy shockwave seemed to be able to tear the sky apart. It carried a destructive aura as it wreaked havoc in all directions. The ground trembled and collapsed. Huge cracks rapidly spread out in all directions, reaching a radius of 10 kilometers in just a short while. The five Heaven Saint Masters' faces instantly became pale. Their bodies were pushed back by the powerful shockwave. Two of the weaker ones immediately spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Jinshan was also pushed back by the powerful shockwave. It was very difficult for him to stabilize his body. The surrounding space was violently distorted, and the scenery was a blur. It was impossible to see clearly. Jinshan was pushed back a full kilometer before he could stabilize his body. He then spread out his spiritual sense, capturing the positions of the five people in front of him. With a thought, the surrounding fire element energy rapidly gathered. In the end, it condensed into five huge red swords in front of him. They emitted heaven-burning flames, and the terrifying heat seemed to evaporate the air. At this moment, the temperature of the world suddenly rose. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. With five ear-piercing sounds, the five elemental swords turned into flashes of red light, shooting towards the five people in front of him with lightning speed. Yun's eyes flashed. He immediately flew into the air, dodging the incoming elemental swords. His body then turned into a white blur, shooting towards Jianshan with lightning speed. The four Heaven Saint Masters below him were weaker, so they had no time to dodge. Without any other choice, they could only use their Earth-tier battle skills to collide with the incoming fire elemental swords. With a violent explosion, the four elemental swords shattered, turning into flames that filled the sky. In an instant, the four Heaven Saint Masters were drowned in flames. In the next moment, four miserable figures flew out from the sea of flames. Their bodies were protected by a barrier of saint force, so their injuries were not serious. Only their faces had become paler. However, the chests of the two weakest people had been blasted into a bloody mess. Large parts of their clothes had been burned away. Damn it, how can he be so strong? Just the fire elemental swords were enough to make us almost unable to resist. This is at least the battle prowess of a fifth cycle Heaven Saint Master. What the hell? He clearly used the wind elemental energy to fly. How can he control the fire elemental energy now? That brat is too strong. He is definitely a senior who has cultivated for a long time. Could he be the second Chanyang ancestor? His strength is actually so strong. As a Heaven Saint Master, the 5 of us are unable to resist him. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang Kingdom were stunned by Jinshan's battle prowess. Even with the 4 of them and Qian Yun of the Qiangan Kingdom, they were unable to gain the slightest advantage. Qian Yun had already arrived in front of Jinshan. The sword in his hand carried a strong energy fluctuation as it pierced towards Jinshan's forehead. Jinshan sneered. An extremely pure azure sword chi instantly shot out from his right hand. Using only the strength of his body, he stabbed out with his sword to block Qian Yun's attack. The azure sword chi's origin energy was extremely pure. It was almost solid. When it came into contact with Qian Yun's sword, it actually effortlessly cut a 2-finger-sized hole in Qian Yun's sword. With his saint weapon damaged, Qian Yun suffered a heavy injury. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and looked at the sword in his hand in shock. His face was filled with disbelief. Jinshan's movements did not stop because of this. The azure sword spirit's origin energy stabbed out again. It easily broke through the layer of saint force around Qian Yun's body and stabbed towards Qian Yun's head. What kind of power is this? Qian Yun was shocked. He immediately tilted his body and dodged with all his strength. The azure sword spirit's origin energy almost brushed past Qian Yun's head. Although he managed to avoid a fatal blow, his left arm was cut off by the azure sword spirit's origin energy. Blood spurted out like a fountain falling from the sky. It was as weak as tofu. Qian Yun groaned. He endured the intense pain and immediately flew up. In the blink of an eye, he was 1,000 meters in the air. He then looked at the pure azure sword chi in Jinshan's hand in shock. He was completely shocked. What kind of power is this? It's so powerful that it can even destroy my saint weapon. Jinshan's eyes were gloomy. His body emitted a strong killing intent as he chased after Qian Yun. P.S. Xiaoyao has seen everyone's concern and support in the review and comment section. I'm very moved. Xiaoyao's update time is indeed unstable. I do not deny this. At the same time, I accept everyone's criticism. However, there are people who actually attack the author's life. The words are very unpleasant and immoral. What kind of quality is this? I have already banned the people who scolded me. 2 days ago, because I needed time to prepare, I didn't dare to rashly write, so the update time was delayed. However, Xiaoyao made it all up. Even if it was delayed, he would make it up the next day. This chapter was the second chapter of the 14th. It was originally planned to be completed around 3 a.m., but in the end, it took until 4:30 a.m. to complete. Xiaoyao could only go to sleep after this chapter was finished. Chapter 403. Seeing Jinshan chasing after him, Qian Yun's expression changed. Jinshan had destroyed his saint weapon in one strike, and he had already lost the courage to fight. He no longer dared to stay behind and fled with all his might. Jinshan coldly looked at the fleeing Qian Yun and did not continue to chase. He said in a deep voice, "I will spare your life today, but in the future, I will let you witness the destruction of the Qiangan Kingdom with your own eyes. I will let you know the consequences of interfering in this matter." Hearing this, Qian Yun's body could not help but tremble. Previously, he had disdained Jinshan's words, but now that he knew of Jinshan's strength, he did not doubt that Jinshan had the ability to destroy the Qiangan Kingdom. In order to destroy a kingdom, it was not necessary to kill everyone in the kingdom. As long as the upper echelons of the kingdom were killed, the kingdom would only exist in name. Jinshan had fought 5 Heaven Saint Masters alone and had even gained the upper hand. With such strength, even if all the Heaven Saint Masters of the Qiangan Kingdom worked together, they would not be able to stop him. At this moment, Qian Yun's heart was filled with regret. If he had known that Jinshan had such strength, he would not have interfered in this matter no matter what. This matter has nothing to do with my Qiangan Kingdom. If you have any enmity, feel free to find me, Qian Yun. Do not implicate the innocent. Qian Yun's body did not slow down at all as he left behind a weak voice that could be heard from afar. Chang Wuji, who had not left yet, stared at Jinshan's extremely young face in shock. His old face was also filled with shock. Although the four Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang Kingdom were not that strong, Qianyun was definitely a terrifying opponent. His strength had already reached the 5th cycle of Heaven Saint Master, infinitely close to the 6th cycle. Even if he wanted to defeat him, he would need to spend a lot of effort. However, he never thought that this seemingly young man would be able to cut off Qianyun's left arm so easily, causing him to flee in fear. Who is he? I have never seen such a young Heaven Saint Master, but why do I feel a sense of familiarity from him? Chong Wuji was filled with doubt as he constantly asked himself. Possessing such great strength at such a young age made him extremely curious about Jinshan's identity. Chong Wuji did not leave. The four Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom had cut off all four of Chongyanghu's limbs, and this enmity was irreconcilable. If he did not take the heads of the four Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom today, he would not have the face to return. Seeing Qianyun's escape, the four Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom paled. Qianyun was the strongest among them. Now that he had left, the four of them would have no way of stopping the powerful young man before them. At this moment, Jinshan charged toward the four of them with the origin energy of the sword spirits. He swung his sword at their heads mercilessly. The four Heaven Saint Masters did not discover the strength of the sword spirits. They used their Earth-tier battle skills once more and slashed at Jinshan. Right now, they could only give it their all. A high-level Earth-tier battle skill was the strongest battle skill they had. Jinshan's face was filled with disdain as he stabbed out 4 times with the origin energy of the sword chi. When the two attacks collided, the saint weapons of the four Heaven Saint Masters exploded with powerful energy, forming a violent shockwave that swept out in all directions. The 5 Heaven Saint Masters were constantly pushed back. When Heaven Saint Masters battled, every attack had the power to shatter mountains. Just as the two sides collided, the 4 Heaven Saint Masters all spat out a mouthful of blood. Their faces instantly became as pale as paper, without a single trace of blood. Their faces were filled with shock. The saint weapons in their hands had all been cut open by the origin energy of the sword spirits. No, impossible. We are all Heaven Saint Masters. How can you damage our saint weapons? One of the Heaven Saint Masters involuntarily cried out in shock. The other 3 Heaven Saint Masters were also filled with disbelief. Jinshan remained silent. His face was cold, but the killing intent in his cold eyes became more and more powerful, causing people to shiver. Afterward, the wind elemental energy around him became more and more powerful. It actually carried his body into the violent shock waves of energy, forcing him toward the 4 Heaven Saint Masters who had already retreated 30 meters away. The origin energy of the azure and violet sword chi slashed out once again. It was extremely fast, and only a flash of azure and violet light could be seen, making it difficult to capture. The 2 most heavily injured Heaven Saint Masters were no longer at their peak condition. Their heads had been cut off, but they did not die. They stared at Jinshan in shock. Afterward, a layer of elemental energy wrapped around their heads and sent them flying into the sky. Jinshan used the wind element to catch up to the 2 fleeing Heaven Saint Masters in the blink of an eye. His left hand struck out with lightning-like speed, striking the 2 heads. The great force dispersed their souls on the spot, wiping them out. Heaven Saint Masters were not as weak as Earth Saint Masters. They could control the force of the world, so their souls were extremely powerful. To kill a Heaven Saint Master, their souls had to be destroyed. The 2 headless bodies powerlessly fell from the sky. Blood spurted from their necks, dyeing the sky red. The 2 heads that Jinshan had dispersed also fell from the sky. The death of the 2 Heaven Saint Masters had an extremely great impact on the 2 remaining Heaven Saint Masters. They stared at Jinshan in extreme shock. Their faces were filled with fear, and they had already decided to retire. Less than 10 minutes had passed since the start of the battle. In such a short amount of time, a 5th cycle Heaven Saint Master had fled in fear, and 2 Heaven Saint Masters had died while his opponent was completely unscathed. Such battle prowess made the 2 remaining Heaven Saint Masters shiver. Their hearts were filled with fear. After killing the 2 Heaven Saint Masters, Jianshun did not stop at all. He continued to charge toward the 2 remaining Heaven Saint Masters with the azure and violet sword spirits in his hand. The 2 remaining Heaven Saint Masters were already heavily injured. Seeing Jianshun charge over, their faces changed drastically. They immediately yelled out, "Run!" Before they had even finished speaking, the 2 of them scattered and fled. They had lost the courage to fight. Jianshun coldly snorted and immediately chased after the person closest to him. With the wind element, he was twice as fast as the 2 of them. He caught up to one of them effortlessly. With a wave of his right hand, the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits mercilessly chopped at his head. The Heaven Saint Master suddenly turned around. The saint weapon in his hand pulsed with energy as he instantly used a high-level Earth Tier battle skill to attack Jianshun. When the 2 collided, the energy of the Earth Tier battle skill immediately exploded. The Heaven Saint Master used this opportunity to retreat. A 2-finger-sized hole had appeared on his saint weapon. Blood violently spurted from his mouth. He had become extremely weak from the repeated injuries. At this moment, there was a flash of azure and violet light. As soon as Jianshun's first strike had been launched, the second strike followed. It was extremely fast, and just as the Heaven Saint Master was about to retreat from Jianshun's attack range, his neck had been severed by the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits. He was as weak as tofu. Jianshun quickly rushed forward and struck out with his left hand. He viciously struck the fleeing Heaven Saint Master's head, dispersing his soul on the spot. Soon after, Jianshun withdrew the origin energy from the sword spirits. He pointed behind him with his right hand, and the blood in the air rapidly condensed in front of his finger before turning into a blood-red sword. It shot toward the last Heaven Saint Master with lightning-like speed as it radiated an azure-colored sword chi. The last Heaven Saint Master was caught off guard. The blood-red sword pierced through his back and through his chest. He immediately let out a miserable cry, but before he could even finish his cry, the space in front of him became fiery red. A sword of fire rapidly condensed in front of him, burning with scorching flames. The intense heat seemed to be able to evaporate even the air. Oh no! The Heaven Saint Master paled in fright. He immediately swung his saint weapon and dispersed the sword of fire. The explosion engulfed him, but he never thought that another sword of fire would silently condense behind him. It easily beheaded him while he was caught off guard. Jianshun beckoned with his hand, and an iron arrow turned into a black streak of light that shot over from afar. It pierced through the Heaven Saint Master's head, causing a spray of blood to spurt out. At this point, the 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang Kingdom had all died in battle. The sounds of the battle gradually calmed down, and the world fell into an eerie silence. Below Jianshun's feet, hundreds of thousands of soldiers lay scattered on the ground. Mountains of corpses and seas of blood covered the ground. The entire ground was bright red, and a thick smell of blood permeated the air. It was extremely pungent and nauseating. Chang Wuji stared blankly at Jianshun, who was floating in the air. The shock in his heart could no longer be described with words. It had only been a short while, and the 4 Heaven Saint Masters had all been killed. Moreover, the powerful young man had not been injured at all. This was just too shocking. At this moment, 4 heads slowly rose from the ground and floated in front of Chang Wuji. Then let them hang on the walls. Jianshun said expressionlessly. Although he had killed 4 Heaven Saint Masters and avenged his brother, he was not happy at all. Thank you for your help, sir." Chang Wuji's voice trembled. He was extremely emotional. If such a mysterious expert stood on the side of the Kingdom of Jessin, then the overall strength of the Kingdom of Jessin would definitely rise by several levels. Jianshun remained silent. He coldly stared at the fortress in front of him. He slowly clenched his hand, and the collapsed ruins of the wall immediately began to shake violently. A 50-meter-long section of the wall slowly floated into the air, surrounded by a faint layer of light. Under the control of Jinshin's mind, it continuously rammed into the fortress. Boom, boom, boom. Dense sounds were transmitted, and the entire ground was trembling violently. The earth quaked, and the mountain swayed as if there was an earthquake. The 50-meter-long section of the wall under Jinshin's control slammed into the fortress again and again, causing the sturdy fortress to be riddled with holes. In just a short moment, the majestic fortress that resembled a creeping dragon completely collapsed and ceased to exist. Chapter 404. The fortress that had guarded the borders of the Pingyang Kingdom for countless years and had weathered countless storms was destroyed by Jinshin, just like that. After the fortress collapsed, the more than 1 million soldiers that were hidden behind it appeared in Jinshin's line of sight. At this moment, all of the soldiers' expressions were sluggish. Many of them even had deep fear in their eyes as they looked at Jinshin, who was floating in the air with fear. The fortress that protected the Pingyang Kingdom had collapsed and turned into ruins. The 4 powerful Heaven Saint Masters had all fallen. After experiencing this tragedy, the strength of the Pingyang Kingdom was greatly reduced, especially the 4 Heaven Saint Masters. This was an irrecoverable loss. Moreover, this was a huge blow to the morale of the soldiers. Heaven Saint Masters were the pillars of strength in every kingdom in this region. They represented the prosperity and status of the kingdom. Especially in times of war, they were the biggest pillar in the hearts of millions of soldiers. They were the faith of millions of soldiers. Their deaths made the millions of soldiers of the Pingyang Kingdom feel as if they had lost their souls. They no longer had the slightest desire to fight. Jinshin coldly glanced at the 1 million soldiers behind the fortress. He then soared into the sky and flew towards the center of the Pingyang Kingdom. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the horizon. Chang Wuji watched as Jinshin left. When he saw the direction Jinshin was heading, his body couldn't help but tremble slightly. He muttered, "Where is he going?" Looking at the direction he's heading towards the royal palace of the Pingyang Kingdom. Is he going to wreak havoc in the royal palace? Jinshin flew as fast as he could. His entire body was wrapped in a thick layer of wind element. He flew over mountains and ridges, passing through cities of various sizes. He flew as fast as lightning towards the royal palace of the Pingyang Kingdom. The royal palace of the Pingyang Kingdom was more than 7,000 kilometers away from the fortress. Even if Jinshin flew at full speed, it would still take him 4 to 6 hours to reach the royal palace. 2 hours after Jinshin left, in the northern fortress of the Kingdom of Jessen, the million soldiers of the Pingyang Kingdom were neatly lined up 10 kilometers away. It was just outside the range of the intermediate magic crystal cannons. At this moment, the million soldiers had already assembled. They only needed to give the order, and they could attack the fortress at any time. On the other hand, the Jessen Kingdom's fortress, which was over 80 meters tall, was in shambles. Many parts of it had collapsed, making it impossible for the soldiers on the walls to pass through. At the entrance of the fortress, the half-meter-thick gate that was completely made of refined steel had also become uneven. It was in ruins, and it was covered in holes. It was so damaged that it couldn't even open normally. In one of the towers on the fortress wall, a few generals in helmets and armors gathered together. They all looked haggard, and their faces were yellow. They didn't look very good. It seems that the Kingdom of Jessen is doomed this time. The enemy has already gathered 1 million soldiers, and they can attack us at any time. Moreover, there are still 2 million soldiers resting at the fortress of the Pingyang Kingdom. It's impossible for us to defend against the enemy with just over 800,000 injured soldiers. An old man in armor sighed and said with a heavy face, "Now, the 50 intermediate magic crystal cannons and 200 beginner magic crystal cannons in the northern fortress are almost all useless. If we continue to use them, they will explode at any time. Moreover, we don't have many magic cores left. We won't be able to hold on for long." A general with a bandage wrapped around his right arm said listlessly, "Let's hold on for as long as we can. Even if we die, we won't let them have it easy." The one who spoke was a middle-aged man in armor. His face was gloomy and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Looking at the expression on the middle-aged man's face, a general in armor beside him sighed and said, "Chanyang Ba, I know that your son has been captured by the Pingyang Kingdom. You must be very upset. But don't worry, the Wuji Senior is very powerful. He will definitely save Chanyang Hu." A sliver of sorrow flashed through Chanyang Ba's eyes as he bitterly said, "It's said that Ahu's limbs have already been chopped off. He's reduced to a cripple who can't even take care of himself. Even if we save him, it'll only make him suffer more." Hearing this, the generals sitting around sighed. Although a powerful Radiant Saint Master could regenerate a person's severed limbs, Radiant Saint Masters with this ability were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns in the Tianyuan continent. Not only were they difficult to find, even if they were found, the Chanyang Prefecture would not be able to invite them. It could be said that Chanyang Hu would never be able to recover in this lifetime. Chanyang Ba, don't forget that you still have a talented fourth son, Chanyang Shoten. Chanyang Shoten condensed a saint weapon at the age of 15. With his talent, his strength will definitely increase a lot when he returns. He might not be any weaker than his elder brother, Chanyang Hu. A few middle-aged men in armor comforted him. These people were all from the 4 great clans of Lore City. They were all on very good terms with the Chanyang Prefecture. When he heard about his fourth son, Chanyang Shoten, Chanyang Ba sighed and sighed. A few years ago, because of the Huayin sect's power, his youngest son had been forced to leave home at the age of 15. It had already been several years since then, and there had been no news of him at all. Even now, Chanyang Ba did not know whether his fourth son, Chanyang Shoten, was still alive or not. At this moment, a young man in light armor walked in with large strides. He smiled and said, "Gentlemen, I just heard you mention something about Chanyang Shoten. Can you tell me more about this Chanyang Shoten? He condensed a saint weapon at the age of 15, 3 years faster than me. How amazing. I'm also very curious about this genius." When they saw the young man walk in, the generals all stood up and enthusiastically greeted him. "Little friend Ming Dong, since you're interested in this matter, let me tell you the whole story," an armored man in armor said with a smile. He then explained everything about Chanyang Shoten in detail, including how great Chanyang Shoten's talent was. When he first became a saint, he was able to defeat several saints and a great saint. He was highly regarded by the king, and in the end, Chanyang Shoten was forced to leave home because of the Huayin sect's power. Chanyang Shoten was only 15 when he left. Now that several years have passed, I don't know where he is. If he had stayed in the kingdom of Jessen, his achievements would not be any weaker than his elder brothers. Perhaps he would already be a great saint master. The armored old man sighed. "The Huayin sect," the armored young man murmured. A vicious light flashed through his eyes, but it disappeared very quickly. He smiled faintly. "Don't worry, patriarch of the Chanyang clan. Your son will definitely return safely." Chanyang Ba let out a long sigh. His face was gloomy. "That's no longer important. In just a few days, my Chanyang Prefecture will cease to exist. Even if he comes back, what's the point? He'll only be buried here. If Xiang'er really is still alive, I hope he doesn't come back. At the very least, he won't be caught in the crossfire." "He won't. Don't worry, patriarch of the Chanyang clan. I will definitely do my best to protect Chanyang Prefecture. If it really doesn't work, I'll go ask my uncle Tian to help," the young man said solemnly. He was extremely serious. Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard that the young man had an uncle. Someone immediately asked, "Ming Dong, is your uncle Tian very powerful?" "I'm not sure about that either. However, if my uncle Tian is willing to take action, stopping this war will definitely not be a problem. Don't look at me like that. I've already begged my uncle Tian a few times before, but he's not willing to interfere at all," said the young man. Hearing this, everyone's faces were filled with disappointment. At this moment, an azure-robed old man walked in from outside. His face was filled with sorrow. Chanyang Ba's eyes immediately lit up when he saw the old man walk in. He immediately arrived before the old man and asked nervously, "Changbo, you've finally returned. How is Ahu? Has he been saved?" Chang Wuji let out a long sigh and said sorrowfully, "Patriarch, the first young master has been successfully saved. He's not in any danger for now. But in the future, Chanyang Ba's face immediately froze. At that moment, he seemed to have become much paler. Out of his 4 children, only his eldest and fourth had some talent for cultivation. His fourth son's fate was unknown, while his eldest son had become a cripple. Now, Chanyang Ba could not find a single capable man other than his third son who had no talent for cultivation at all. After a long while, Chanyang Ba finally calmed down. He sighed at the sky and said softly, "It's fine as long as he's alive. Let's talk about the future in the future." Chang Wuji also remained silent. He was dispirited. How could he not understand Chanyang Ba's feelings? He was also heartbroken that Chanyang, who had ended up in such a miserable state. After all, he had watched him grow up. Although he was not a relative, he was more than a relative. None of the people in the tower said anything. They were all in a heavy mood. The kingdom of Jessen was facing such a tragic situation that could not be changed. Soon, they would all die on the battlefield and be buried here. After a long while, Chang Wuji suppressed the sorrow in his heart and said, "Patriarch, there's a piece of good news that I should tell everyone. When I went to save the first young master, I encountered a mysterious young expert. He killed all 4 Heaven Saint Masters guarding the fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang. He even destroyed the border fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang." Hearing this, the armored people in the tower turned pale with fright. They looked at Chang Wuji in disbelief. An old man immediately asked, "Senior Wuji, what did you say?" 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the kingdom of Pingyang were killed by a mysterious young expert. Is this true? Chang Wuji waved his hand and took out 4 bloody heads from his space ring. He placed them on the table one by one. Looking at the 4 heads on the table, everyone's expression suddenly became sluggish. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Ming Dong's eyes also flashed. He asked, "Senior Wuji, what's the name of the person who killed the 4 Heaven Saint Masters?" "I don't know either. When I arrived, the first young master had already been saved by him. It seems like he has an extraordinary relationship with the first young master," Chang Wuji said with a hint of confusion. Hearing this, Ming Dong's face became thoughtful. His eyes flashed. Afterward, Chang Wuji hung the heads of the 4 Heaven Saint Masters high on the walls of the fortress. This greatly increased the morale of the troops. Cheers could be heard everywhere. Not long after, 2 furious roars came from the front. 2 dots of light, one red and one yellow, appeared in the distant sky. They quickly shot toward the fortress of the kingdom of Jessen. A powerful aura filled the air, making it difficult for the soldiers below to breathe. Chapter 405. Not long after, 2 furious roars could be heard from the front. A red and a yellow dot of light appeared in the distant sky, rapidly flying toward the kingdom of Jessen's fort. A powerful aura filled the air, causing the soldiers below to have difficulty breathing. The 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the kingdom of Pingyang, who were stationed at the front lines, received the news and were furious. Chang Wuji stepped forward and stopped the 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the kingdom of Pingyang 3 kilometers away from the fort. At the same time, another powerful aura rushed out from the kingdom of Jessen's fort. A Heaven Saint Master from the kingdom of Jessen flew over from behind and stood shoulder to shoulder with Chang Wuji. The person who came was also an old man wearing a white robe. His face was pale and his hair was messy. He looked quite haggard. He was the principal of the kingdom of Jessen's Karga's Academy, Kafir. The 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the kingdom of Pingyang looked at the 4 heads hanging on the walls of the kingdom of Jessen with anger. They were so angry that their bodies trembled. First, Chang Wuji had killed 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the kingdom of Pingyang. Now, 4 Heaven Saint Masters had died, resulting in the death of 6 peak experts from the kingdom of Pingyang. This loss was just too great, and it was not something they could accept. The 4 were enemies, and when they saw each other, their eyes blazed with hatred. Without saying a single word, they began to fight. Surging waves of energy wreaked havoc in the sky, causing the already dilapidated walls of the kingdom of Jessen to tremble. Chang Wuji and Kafir had gone through many battles before, and now they were both injured. their strength was not even at 50% of their peak. The two sides only fought for a short, while before Kaffir's chest was pierced by his opponent's sword. Violent Saint force entered his body, immediately shattering his organs. "Kaffir, stand down. I'll deal with them." Chang Wuji roared angrily, a resolute look flashing in his eyes. Suddenly, his battle strength increased threefold, and he knocked back his opponent with a single blow. Then, he rushed towards Kaffir's opponent, blocking both of them by himself. Although Chang Wuji had not fully recovered from his injuries, his current battle prowess was even greater than when he was at his peak. Not only did he stop the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom, he even gained the upper hand. He must be using some kind of secret technique. He won't be able to hold on for long. We must hold on. The two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom were also very experienced people, so they immediately explained Chang Wuji's current situation. Chang Wuji didn't say a word. He knew that he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer, so he decided to attack with all his might. After a few dozen exchanges, one of the Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom was blown away by Chang Wuji's Earth Tier battle skill, causing the pressure on the remaining Heaven Saint Master to increase greatly. Kaffir's face was deathly pale as he stood on the city wall, nervously looking at Chang Wuji. Right now, his internal organs had been completely shattered, and he had almost lost the ability to fight. Although he was unwilling, he could only stand here and watch the battle, unable to interfere. "Dean, quickly go and treat your injuries." A middle-aged man came to Kaffir's side, his face filled with concern. This person was the Vice Dean of the Kargath Academy, by N. Kaffir shook his head, saying, "My injuries are too severe. The Radiant Saint Masters from the Northern Fort are unable to heal me at all. Furthermore, they have been greatly exhausted these past few days, so they no longer have the energy to condense Radiant Saint force." "Dean, don't worry. Senior Wuji's strength is extraordinary. He will definitely be able to repel the experts from the Pingyang Kingdom." By N comforted, Kaffir shook his head, saying, "His situation isn't much better than mine. Our kingdom of Jessen's Radiant Saint Masters are scattered in the 4 forts. In terms of numbers, we can't compare to the 4 allied armies. He still hasn't recovered from his injuries a few days ago. Even if he can temporarily injure the 2 experts from the Pingyang Kingdom, it won't be of any use. They have gathered all the Radiant Saint Masters from the kingdom of Jessen behind them. No matter how severe his injuries are, he will be able to recover very quickly, unless we can completely kill them." The first form of the 3 styles of the Berserk Python. A loud shout came from the front. Chang Wuji's body burned with intense saint force as he raised his saint weapon high into the air. An extremely powerful pressure suddenly appeared between heaven and earth, tightly binding his opponent in the air and hindering their movements. Wind and clouds surged between the heavens and the earth. Fierce gales wreaked havoc between the heavens and the earth, blowing up the sand and stones on the ground. Smoke and dust filled the sky, covering the sun and the sky. The entire sky appeared gray, as if the end of the world had arrived. "He's using a Heaven Tier battle skill. Quickly retreat." The 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom turned pale with fright as they cried out in alarm, quickly retreating to the back. Unfortunately, only one of them was able to escape. The other was locked in place by the pressure of the Heaven Tier battle skill and was forcibly bound in the air, unable to escape at all. The Heaven Tier battle skill was quickly completed. With a loud shout, Chang Wuji swung the huge sword in his hand with enough power to destroy heaven and earth. Under the shocked gaze of the Heaven Saint Master, the sword slashed through his head and his entire body was cleaved in 2, dyeing the sky with blood. However, the remaining power of the heaven-ranked battle skill did not diminish in the slightest. A dazzling ray of light pierced through the sky and fiercely bombarded the ground below. Suddenly, the earth trembled and the mountains shook. The remaining power of the heaven-ranked battle skill created a 10-mile-long trench on the ground. Thousands of soldiers from the Pingyang Kingdom who were a few miles away were affected and died under the remaining power of the heaven-ranked battle skill. After using the Heaven Tier battle skill, Chang Wuji's body shook violently, almost unable to control himself, and fell from the sky. His originally pale face was now completely devoid of blood, looking sickly. The remaining Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom had an extremely ugly expression. In this battle, his Pingyang Kingdom had suffered the greatest losses. Right now, they had already lost 7 peak experts. Even if the Pingyang Kingdom could win this battle, their status would not be as good as before. At this moment, a few powerful auras came from afar. A few peak experts surrounded by elemental energy were flying over. Pingyang Kingdom, our hidden dragon kingdom has come to assist you in taking the northern part of the city. Before they arrived, an old voice rang out, full of vigor. As soon as they heard the identity of the people who had come, the expressions of the soldiers of the kingdom of Jessen changed drastically. Their faces were ashen and their eyes were filled with despair. The principal of the Kargath Academy, who stood on the city walls, also let out a long sigh. He murmured, "The heavens have destroyed our kingdom of Jessen." Chang Wuji's expression was ugly. Looking at the 4 Heaven Saint Masters rapidly approaching from afar, his face was also filled with despair. He then sighed inwardly and flew back to the walls of the kingdom of Jessen with a gloomy expression. In the northern fortress of the kingdom of Jessen, there were only 2 Heaven Saint Masters, him and the principal of the Kargath Academy, guarding it. Now that the 2 of them had lost the ability to fight, there was no way they could deal with 5 Heaven Saint Masters working together. Very soon, the Heaven Saint Masters of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom and the Pingyang Kingdom gathered together. The surviving Heaven Saint Master of the Pingyang Kingdom looked at the powerful reinforcements with joy. He said, "Has your Hidden Dragon Kingdom already taken the western fortress of the Kingdom of Jessen?" An old man from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom immediately laughed and said, "That's right. The western fortress of the Kingdom of Jessen has already been taken by our Hidden Dragon Kingdom. Of the 3 peak experts of the Kingdom of Jessen, 2 are dead and 1 has fled. Right now, our army is marching towards the imperial city of the Kingdom of Jessen. We heard that there was some trouble at the northern fortress, so the 4 of us immediately rushed over to help. I believe that before long, reinforcements from the Blue Wind Kingdom will arrive as well." The old man from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom spoke very loudly. His voice could be heard throughout the entire fortress of the Kingdom of Jessen. He purposely used this to attack the morale of the Kingdom of Jessen. As expected, after hearing this, the soldiers of the Kingdom of Jessen all lost their courage to fight. Many of them sat on the ground with pale faces. They had lost all will to fight. Some of the soldiers even began to take off their armor, preparing to surrender. Kingdom of Jessen, surrender. Those who surrender will be spared. An old man from a hidden dragon kingdom hovered in the air and looked down at the soldiers below. The Kingdom of Jessen has no soldiers who surrender. We would rather die than become slaves. An old general standing on the wall shouted. He did not fear death at all. "You're courting death." A cold light flashed through the eyes of the old man from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. With a wave of his hand, a yellow elemental sword condensed in the air and shot towards the old general with lightning speed. Boom! The yellow elemental sword exploded in the old general's body, leaving him completely unharmed. "Old General Ling! Old General Ling!" The surrounding generals all cried out in grief, their faces filled with sorrow. Chang Wuji and Kafir both sighed. The 2 of them looked at each other, and a trace of determination appeared in their eyes. They slowly floated into the air and faced off against the 5 Heaven Saint Masters. They would rather die on the battlefield than live an ignoble existence under someone else. The Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom hated the 2 of them to the extreme. He angrily shouted, "Chang Wuji, Kafir, since the 2 of you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Everyone, let's attack together and completely annihilate them." "That's fine. I heard that Chang Wuji has grasped a heaven-tier battle skill. To prevent any accidents from happening, let's all attack together," an old man from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom said. Soon after, the 5 Heaven Saint Masters charged towards Chang Wuji and Kafir, their killing intent soaring. Chang Wuji and Kafir were expressionless. They had already prepared themselves to be buried here. At this crucial moment, suddenly, several powerful auras appeared in the distance. From the horizon, 5 more Heaven Saint Masters radiated with the light of elemental energy as they flew over. The sudden appearance of these 5 people caused the Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom and the Hidden Dragon Kingdom to involuntarily stop. They all hovered in the air as they watched the 5 rapidly approaching figures. Could it be that the Blue Wind Kingdom has broken through the eastern ford of the Kingdom of Jessin and is sending reinforcements? No, the reinforcements from the Blue Wind Kingdom can't be coming in that direction. The Heaven Saint Masters of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom discussed with one another. Their faces all became rather stern as they stared at the 5 experts who were rapidly approaching them. Very soon, the 5 Heaven Saint Masters stopped 100 meters away from the group. There were a total of 4 old men and 1 middle-aged man. The old man at the front held a snow-white magical beast in his arms. The magical beast opened its bright eyes and looked around curiously. The Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom all became serious. This was because the 5 Heaven Saint Masters that had suddenly arrived were all unfamiliar faces. They did not recognize a single one of them. They were not from this region at all. Chapter 406. The Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom glanced at each other. They did not know whether these people were friends or foes, or if they were just passers-by. "We are from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. May I ask who you are?" A Heaven Saint Master from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom cupped his hands and asked. His tone was extremely polite because he could already feel the strength of these people. "We are from the Qin Empire." The one who spoke was a middle-aged man, standing at the back. The Qin Empire? The people from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom were all stunned, and their expressions were filled with confusion. This was because there wasn't a single Qinhuang kingdom in the vicinity. Suddenly, an old man from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom seemed to have thought of something. His expression immediately changed as he looked at the 5 people in front of him in shock. He cried out in surprise, "The Qin Empire! Could it be the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great empires of the Tianyuan continent?" Hearing this, everyone's expression changed, including Chang Wuji and Kafir. Everyone looked at the 5 people who claimed to be from the Qin Empire in shock. On the Tianyuan continent, the 3 great empires were the strongest. They were the strongest empires standing at the peak of the Tianyuan continent. Every single one of them was terrifyingly powerful. Below the 3 great empires, there were 8 great empires. These 8 great empires were also extremely powerful, only second to the 3 great empires. The Qin Empire was one of the 8 great empires. Its strength was so great that it could easily sweep through all directions. It was one of the peak powers of the Tianyuan continent, an existence that stood at the top of the pyramid. The old man holding the snow-white little beast nodded and said, "Correct, we are the state teachers of the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great empires." After receiving confirmation, the 5 Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom and the Pingyang Kingdom immediately became respectful. Although they were all Heaven Saint Masters, the state teachers of the Qin Empire had a much higher status than them. As one of the 8 great empires of the Tianyuan continent, the state teachers of the Qin Empire were also very powerful. Those who could hold the position of state teacher were all people with outstanding talent. It was difficult for them to find an opponent in the same level of cultivation. Moreover, they all knew heaven-tier battle skills. Their battle prowess was not something the Heaven Saint Masters of this region could compare to. After learning the identities of the 5 people, even Chang Wuji and Kafir were surprised. They never thought that they would actually meet the state teachers of the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great empires of the 8 great empires. This was indeed an extremely rare occurrence. However, the state teachers of the Imperial Empire, the Kingdom of Jessin and the Hidden Dragon Kingdom, the Kingdom of Jessin and the Qin Empire. As one of the 8 great empires of the Tianyuan continent, the Qin Empire also had many vassal states. These vassal states were much stronger than the Kingdom of Jessin. It was not an exaggeration to say that, including the Kingdom of Jessin, the surrounding states did not even have the ability to become vassal states of the Qin Empire. The four heaven saint masters of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom immediately greeted the five state teachers of the Qin Empire with smiles on their faces. Each one of them had a respectful attitude, hoping to use this rare opportunity to form a relationship with the state teachers of the Qin Empire. Once the two sides interacted, the benefits to them would be immeasurable. The Qinhuang Kingdom's leader coldly looked at everyone. Not even a single smile could be seen on his face. The old man, carrying the snow-white little critter, faintly glanced around and said, "Does that stronghold belong to the Jesson Kingdom?" Hearing this, everyone present was stunned. They did not know why the state teachers of the Qin Empire would ask such a question. Although they were filled with doubt, they did not dare to be careless. The Heaven Saint Master of the Pingyang Kingdom was the first to speak. "Correct. That is the northern border fort of the Kingdom of Jesson. And who are you?" The old man holding the snow-white beast expressionlessly asked. "I am Xiong Baodai, a member of the Xiong family of the Pingyang Kingdom." The Heaven Saint Master of the Pingyang Kingdom said with a smile. The old man holding the snow-white beast immediately lost interest. In the end, his gaze calmly fell on the heavily injured and pale Chong Wuji and Kaffir. He calmly said, "I presume you are from the Kingdom of Jesson." Chong Wuji and Kaffir looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with doubt. They did not know why the state teachers of the Qin Empire would ask such a question. Moreover, as a small and remote country, the Kingdom of Jesson should not have caught the eye of the state teachers of the Qin Empire. Why were these state teachers of such high status beginning to care about such small matters? "Correct. We are from the Kingdom of Jesson." Chong Wuji opened his mouth. Although the Kingdom of Jesson was about to be destroyed, he did not want to offend the people of the Qin Empire. The old man holding the snow-white beast finally revealed a faint smile on his face. He said, "It seems that we are not late. The five of us have come under the orders of the Imperial Protector to assist the Kingdom of Jesson in fending off foreign enemies. If there is anything you need, please do not hesitate to ask." As soon as the state teacher of the Qin Empire finished speaking, everyone present was stunned. Their faces were filled with disbelief. However, the expressions of the five Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom and the Pingyang Kingdom changed drastically. In an instant, their faces became extremely ugly. None of them would have thought that the Kingdom of Jesson would have relations with the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great nations of the Tianyuan continent. Moreover, the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire had specially sent 5 state teachers to assist them. This news was like a bolt from the blue to them, causing them to be stunned on the spot. They knew very well just how important the Imperial Protector was in a kingdom. Now that the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire was standing behind the Kingdom of Jesson, even if the 4 nations attacked the Kingdom of Jesson, they could only obediently retreat in the end. This was because the strength of the Qinhuang Kingdom was not something they could provoke. Although the 4 nations had an army of over 20 million, and there were quite a few Heaven Saint Masters, the Qinhuang Kingdom would probably only need to send out 1 million elites to completely defeat them. Chong Wuji and Kaffir were also stunned for a good while, unable to return to their senses for a long time. They both thought that they had misheard. These 5 state teachers of the Qin Empire had actually come to assist the Kingdom of Jesson against an external enemy, and they were even sent by the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire. At this moment, the 2 of them were filled with doubts. Since when did the Kingdom of Jesson have relations with one of the 8 great nations of the continent, the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire? "Let's go." The 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom had already realized that the situation was not good. Immediately, one of them shouted and quickly retreated into the distance. The Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom did not hesitate and retreated with the 4 of them. The old man, with the snow-white little critter in his arms, signaled to the 4 people behind him. The 4 people behind him understood and immediately chased after the 5 Heaven Saint Masters. The faces of the Heaven Saint Masters changed drastically. Immediately, one of them lost his cool and asked, "State teachers, we have no enmity between us. Why are you chasing us so relentlessly?" His voice was filled with panic. The 4 state teachers of the Qin Empire did not say a word. Very soon, a great battle broke out between the 2 sides. The battle between the 9 Heaven Saint Masters was extremely spectacular. At this moment, they were in the air above the million-strong army of the Pingyang Kingdom. The violent shock waves of the battle spread below, causing the million-strong army of the Pingyang Kingdom to suffer heavy casualties. Those who could assume the position of state teacher of the Qin Empire were all elites carefully selected from thousands of people. Their battle prowess was hard to find in the same level as them. Furthermore, they had many unique skills. As 3rd Cycle Heaven Saint Masters, they could easily suppress 4th Cycle Heaven Saint Masters. Even though it was 4 against 5, not only did they have the upper hand, they were also firmly suppressing the 5 of them. Chang Wuji and Kafir were dumbfounded at the scene unfolding before them. Even now, the two of them felt that this was just too unbelievable. It was as if they were dreaming. In this desperate situation, the kingdom of Jessen had actually obtained such powerful reinforcements. Moreover, the reinforcements were the imperial protector of the Qin Empire. On the walls of the kingdom of Jessen, countless ashen-faced generals and soldiers were reignited with fighting spirit. They all excitedly watched the battle unfold before them. There were even some generals who had tears of excitement in their eyes. At this moment, they could already see the dawn of victory. The battle at the front was extremely intense. Surging waves of energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom and 1 Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom were quickly beaten by the 4 Imperial Advisors from the Qinhuang Kingdom to the point where they all spat out mouthfuls of blood. "Seal the Saint Force in their bodies," an old man said. He then formed a seal with his hands and used a secret technique to seal the Saint Force of the 5 Heaven Saint Masters. With their strength sealed, the 5 Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom and the Pingyang Kingdom all paled. With their strength sealed, they had become fish on the chopping block. They did not even have the chance to escape. The 4 state teachers of the Qin Empire escorted the 5 sealed Heaven Saint Masters to the old man holding the snow-white magical beast. He was the strongest person present, so the others all followed his lead. The old man holding the snow-white magical beast arrived in front of Chang Wuji and Kafir and said, "Old man Xiaotian, under the orders of the Imperial Protector, I have come to assist you. If you have any use for us, feel free to ask. There is no need to be courteous. As for the people from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom, I will leave them to you." Chang Wuji and Kafir were extremely excited. After exchanging a few pleasantries with the state teachers of the Qin Empire, they politely invited the 5 to the top of the city wall. The sealed Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom were also sent to the guillotine and beheaded in front of everyone. The heads of the 9 Heaven Saint Masters were hung high above the northern fort of the kingdom of Jessen. The hands of these Heaven Saint Masters were stained with the blood of countless soldiers of the kingdom of Jessen. Moreover, they had killed the 2 peak experts stationed at the eastern fort of the kingdom of Jessen. Their crimes were unforgivable. If they were not killed, it would be difficult to appease the hatred in the hearts of the soldiers. In a huge city gate tower, all the famous generals of the northern fortress were gathered here. They were all looking at the 5 imperial teachers of the Qinhuang Kingdom with excitement. For hours later, the 5 imperial advisors of the Qinhuang Kingdom all went their separate ways. Xiao Tian went to the eastern fort alone with a small magical beast in his arms. The remaining 4 Heaven Saint Masters also went their separate ways to the western fort and the southern fort respectively. Chapter 407. The 5 Heaven Saint Masters from the Qinhuang Kingdom did not stay at the northern stronghold for too long. They were all under the orders of the Imperial Protector to assist the Jessen Kingdom in defending against their enemies. So when they learned of the current situation of the Jessen Kingdom from the commanders of the northern stronghold, they immediately split up into 3 groups to assist the eastern, southern, and western strongholds of the Jessen Kingdom. The northern stronghold of the Jessen Kingdom was still guarded by the 2 Heaven Saint Masters, Chang Wuji and Kafir. After taking the Radiant Spirit pills from the 5 Heaven Saint Masters, they quickly stabilized their bodies and began to heal. With the help of the Radiant Saint Masters, their wounds began to heal at a rapid rate. The millions of soldiers from the Pingyang Kingdom had already suffered heavy casualties from the previous battle between the Heaven Saint Masters. With 5 of their own dead, their morale had taken a huge hit and no longer had the will to fight. Thus, the army retreated 15 kilometers away from the stronghold. By now, the situation at the northern stronghold of the Jesson Kingdom had temporarily stabilized. However, if the 4 kingdoms did not retreat, then the crisis would not be resolved. At this moment, an uninvited guest had arrived at the imperial palace of the Pingyang Kingdom. Jianshun had already arrived at the imperial palace of the Pingyang Kingdom and was now walking toward the palace gates. Although the Pingyang Kingdom was in a war, the imperial palace was extremely calm, without a single trace of nervousness. "Halt, what are you doing?" Just as Jianshan was about to enter the palace gates, he was stopped by 2 guards. Jianshan's eyes flashed as an azure and violet sword chi shot out from his fingertips and slashed at the necks of the 2 guards. The 2 guards didn't even have a chance to cry out before falling to the ground. The scene in front of them caused the faces of the other guards to change. Immediately, one of them cried out, "Impudent! He's here to cause trouble. Capture him." There were at least 30 guards standing guard at the gates of the Pingyang Kingdom in a single line. Hearing the shout, the rest of the guards didn't hesitate and immediately took out their saint weapons to charge at Jianshan. Jianshan's face was emotionless, and his eyes were cold. With a light tap of his finger, a ray of azure and violet sword chi shot out from his fingertips toward the 30 soldiers that were charging at him. Each of the sword chi accurately struck their throats, creating a fist-sized hole in their throats. Blood sprayed into the air like a blooming flower. The 30 guards didn't even have a chance to cry out before they fell to the ground. In an instant, the pristine marble floor was dyed red with blood as a bloody smell began to fill the air. Suddenly, an ear-piercing whistle came from the walls of the imperial palace. The scene below was discovered by the soldiers on the walls, and they immediately blew the whistle. The whistle was hurried and long, and it was the highest level of warning. Not long after, a series of heavy footsteps could be heard coming from the palace gates. The sounds were so uniform that it sounded like the drums of war. At the same time, the palace gates of the Pingyang Kingdom slowly opened up as a group of armored soldiers came running out. Each one of them had a cold expression on their faces and a cold glare. This was a group of elite soldiers that had been baptized by slaughter. In front of this group of elite soldiers, a silver-armored middle-aged man rode on top of a Class 3 magical beast. His cold eyes swept over the 30 soldiers that had fallen to the ground before finally landing on the 20-year-old Jianshan. With a wave of his hand, he roared, "Capture him!" The elite soldiers behind the middle-aged man immediately charged forward and surrounded Jianshan in a fan-shaped encirclement. Jianshan had a disdainful smile on his face as he pointed out with his finger. One after another, the azure and violet sword chi shot out. Against this finger-sized sword chi, the group of elite soldiers didn't even have a chance to dodge before their throats were pierced by the azure and violet sword chi. In the blink of an eye, another 40 soldiers had fallen to the ground. The middle-aged man on top of the Class 3 magical beast had a serious look on his face as a 3-meter-long earthen spear appeared in his hand. Leaping down from his mount, he charged at Jianshan with the spear in his hand, stabbing at Jianshan's throat like a bolt of lightning. The middle-aged man was a first-cycle Earth Saint Master, but this level of strength wasn't enough to enter Jianshan's eyes. With a point of his finger, a faint azure and violet sword chi shot out from Jianshan's finger and collided with the middle-aged man's spear. Ding! Following a clear sound, the middle-aged man's body began to tremble as the azure and violet sword chi had shaken his arms to the point of numbness. Instead of moving forward, he was sent flying back to the ground. By the time he hit the ground, he had uncontrollably retreated a dozen steps. At that moment, another azure and violet sword chi shot out from Jianshan's finger and pierced through the middle-aged man's throat before he could even stabilize himself. Oh! The middle-aged man's magical beast mount was a black panther. With a low growl, the black panther shot toward Jianshan. The azure and violet sword chi condensed on Jianshan's fingertip without even looking at the panther. Just as the panther approached him, Jianshan waved his right hand, and the azure and violet sword chi sliced through the panther's head like it was tofu. The elite soldiers that had followed the middle-aged man had over 200 men, but at this moment, all of their faces had blanched. Jianshan's display of strength was enough to strike fear into their hearts. "Quick, sound the war drums! Hurry up and sound the drums!" The remaining soldiers knew that Jianshan's strength wasn't something they could stop, so they quickly ran back to the imperial palace. Dong 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 dong. The sound of the war drums could be heard from within the imperial palace. The sound was so loud that everyone in the imperial palace could hear it. Hearing the sound of the war drums, everyone in the imperial palace was stunned. They couldn't even remember how many years it had been since they last heard the sound of the war drums. But soon after, everyone came to their senses, and the entire imperial palace began to bustle with activity. Groups of armored men began to appear from all over the imperial palace as they began to gather at the entrance of the imperial palace. Not wanting to fall behind, the experts that were hidden within the imperial palace began to fly toward the entrance as well. Under the control of Jian Qin's mind, the two bronze lions at the entrance of the palace began to float into the air, with a faint layer of azure and violet sword chi surrounding them. They began to fly toward the walls of the palace at an extremely fast speed. Bang! Two loud booms rang out, and two huge holes appeared in the incomparably sturdy city wall. The palace gate, which was completely made of steel, was also completely destroyed. Chapter 408. The 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire did not stay in the kingdom of Jessen's northern fortress for too long. They obeyed the orders of the imperial protector and came to assist the kingdom of Jessen in fending off the invaders. Hence, when they heard about the current situation in the kingdom of Jessen from the generals in the northern fortress, they immediately split into 3 groups and went to assist the eastern, western, and eastern fortresses of the kingdom of Jessen. The northern fortress of the kingdom of Jessen was still guarded by the 2 Heaven Saint Masters, Chong Wuji and Kafir. They consumed the radiant spiritual pills given by the 5 imperial advisors and went to treat their wounds. Very quickly, they stabilized their bodies and healed their wounds with the help of a large number of radiant Saint Masters. The million-strong army of the kingdom of Pingyang had already suffered heavy casualties in a previous battle with the Heaven Saint Masters. Now that 5 of their Heaven Saint Masters have been killed, their morale took a huge hit and they no longer had the will to fight. The army retreated 30 miles and did not move. Currently, the situation in the northern fortress of the kingdom of Jessen had stabilized. However, if the 4 allied armies did not retreat, the crisis would still not be resolved. At this moment, an uninvited guest was welcomed in the royal capital of the kingdom of Pingyang. Jianshan had already arrived at the royal palace of the kingdom of Pingyang after flying for some time. He walked towards the entrance of the royal palace with an expressionless face. Although there was a huge battle going on outside the kingdom of Pingyang, the royal palace was very peaceful. There was not the slightest bit of tension. "Stop! What are you doing?" Just as Jianshan approached the entrance of the royal palace, he was stopped by 2 guards. Jianshan's eyes flashed, and a ray of azure sword chi shot out from his fingertips. His right hand swept across the necks of the 2 guards like a bolt of lightning. The 2 guards guarding the palace gate fell to the ground without even making a sound. This scene caused the rest of the guards to change their expressions. Someone immediately shouted, "How dare you? He is here to cause trouble. Quickly capture him." There were more than 30 guards guarding the entrance of the royal palace of the Pingyang kingdom. They stood in a straight line on both sides of the palace gate. Hearing this shout, the rest of the guards did not hesitate and rushed towards Jianshan with their saint weapons. Jianshan remained emotionless. His eyes were cold as he gently extended his finger. Strands of azulite sword chi shot out from the tip of his finger, shooting toward the 30 or so soldiers. They accurately struck their throats, creating fist-sized holes in their throats. Blood splattered in the air like blooming flowers. More than 30 guards couldn't even let out a scream before they fell to the ground one after another. The spotless marble floor was dyed red in the blink of an eye, and a faint smell of blood permeated the air, slowly spreading to the surroundings. Suddenly, an ear-piercing whistle came from the walls of the royal palace. The scene below had been discovered by the guards on the walls. They immediately blew the whistle to warn the guards. The whistle was long and hurried, the highest level of warning. Not long after, a series of heavy footsteps could be heard coming from the closed palace door. The sound was uniform, as if a war drum was beating. At the same time, the closed palace door of the Pingyang kingdom slowly opened. A pair of armored soldiers ran out in uniform steps. Each of them had a cold expression on their face, and their eyes were sharp and cold. This was an elite troop that had been baptized by the baptism of slaughter. Their aura was magnificent. In front of this group of elite soldiers, a middle-aged man wearing silver-white armor rode on a rank 3 magic beast. His cold gaze swept across the 30 or so fallen soldiers in front of the palace gate. Finally, his gaze landed on Jianshun, who looked to be in his 20s. He waved his hand and shouted, "Capture him!" The group of elite soldiers behind the middle-aged man immediately rushed forward and surrounded Jianshun in a fan shape. Jianshun's mouth revealed a trace of disdain. His finger continuously moved, and purple and green sword chi continuously shot out. Facing this finger-sized sword chi, the group of elite soldiers didn't have the slightest ability to dodge. One by one, the sword chi pierced through their throats. In the blink of an eye, another 40 or so soldiers fell to the ground. The middle-aged man, riding on the rank 3 magic beast, had a serious expression. Then, a 3-meter-long yellow spear appeared in his hand. He jumped down from his mount and quickly rushed towards Jianshun. The yellow spear in his hand was like lightning as he stabbed towards Jianshun's throat. The middle-aged man was a first-cycle Earth Saint Master. This kind of strength was simply not enough to enter Jianshun's eyes. Jianshun pointed his finger, and a faint purple and green sword chi shot out from his fingertip and collided with the middle-aged man's spear. Ding! With a crisp sound, the middle-aged man's body violently shook. An azure-violet sword chi that was as thick as a finger had actually caused his arms to become numb. Instead of moving forward, he was sent flying backwards. When he landed on the ground, he had uncontrollably taken over 10 steps back. At this moment, another purple and green sword chi shot out from Jianshun's fingertip. Before the middle-aged man could even stabilize his body, the sword chi had already pierced his throat. Roar! The middle-aged man was riding on a black panther. It let out a deep roar and turned into a black blur as it shot towards Jianshun. The faint purple and green sword chi did not disperse at the tip of Jianshun's finger. He did not even glance at the black panther. Just as the black panther approached him, he waved his right hand, and the sword chi at the tip of his finger cut off the panther's head like it was tofu. There were over 200 elite soldiers who had come with the middle-aged man. At this moment, all of their expressions changed. The strength that Jianshun had displayed had already made them feel fear. "Quick, sound the war drums! Quick, sound the war drums!" The remaining soldiers knew that Jianshun's strength was not something that they could stop, so they all fled back to the palace. Dong, 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 dong. The heavy sound of the war drums rang out in the palace. The sound had a very strong penetrative force, so everyone in the palace could hear it. Hearing the sound of the war drums, everyone in the palace was stunned. They could not remember just how many years it had been since they last heard the sound of the war drums. However, soon after, everyone reacted and the entire palace immediately became lively. Groups of people wearing helmets and armors appeared all over the imperial palace and quickly gathered at the entrance of the imperial palace. The experts hidden in the imperial palace were not willing to be left behind and rushed towards the entrance of the imperial palace. Under Jianshun's control, the 2 copper lions that weighed over 5,000 kilograms levitated into the air. Afterwards, a faint layer of azure and violet sword chi covered them as they smashed towards the walls of the imperial palace at an extremely fast speed. Boom! 2 huge explosions rang out as 2 huge holes were smashed into the sturdy walls. The palace gates that were completely made of steel were also completely destroyed. Chapter 409. Boom! 2 loud explosions rang out as 2 huge holes appeared in the sturdy city walls. The palace gates that were completely made of steel were also completely destroyed. Jianshun did not stop there. With his mind, he controlled the two bronze stone lions to continuously bombard the walls of the palace. Very soon, the walls of the palace were destroyed beyond recognition. A few miles of the city walls had already collapsed into ruins. Now, the entire palace of the Pingyang Kingdom was alarmed. Countless experts and armored elite soldiers rushed over from all directions. The Earth Saint Masters hidden in the corners of the palace were the first to bear the brunt. They had already arrived in front of the collapsed city walls and stared coldly at Jianshan. "Where did you come from? How dare you cause trouble in the palace of the Pingyang Kingdom? How dare you cause trouble in the palace of the Pingyang Kingdom? You must be tired of living. Who are you? Quickly report your name. How dare you destroy the palace? You can't be forgiven." Curses mixed with endless anger rang out one after another. More than 20 Earth Saint Masters wearing different kinds of clothes rushed toward Jianshan. Saint weapons appeared in their hands in an instant, carrying surging waves of energy as they slashed toward Jianshan. Two whistling sounds could be heard as two bronze lions, each weighing over 5,000 kilograms, flew through the air in a beautiful arc, shooting towards the people charging towards them with a faint sword chi. At the same time, countless large pieces of rock floated into the air from the damaged walls, enveloping the 20 or so Earth Saint Masters charging towards them with lightning speed. These stones carried a faint purple and green sword chi. Their attack power was very strong, capable of injuring Heaven Saint Masters. Facing such a powerful attack, the group of Earth Saint Masters did not even have the strength to block before their bodies were smashed into pieces. When the saint weapons in their hands chopped at the stones, they were actually unable to damage them at all. In less than a breath's time, the 20 Earth Saint Masters were all dead. In Jinshan's eyes, only Heaven Saint Masters had the ability to fight him. Earth Saint Masters were peak experts in his eyes a few years ago, but now they did not even have the ability to injure Jianshan. They could not even approach Jianshan. Muffled and disorderly footsteps came from the front. A dense crowd of soldiers wearing excellent armor surged forward like a tide. There were at least several thousand of them, and they quickly surrounded Jianshan. All of them stared at Jianshan with grave expressions. "Your Excellency, who are you? Why did you destroy my Pingyang Kingdom's imperial palace?" An old general riding a Class 3 magical beast asked in a deep voice as he stood in the middle of a group of soldiers, his expression very unsightly. Jinshan's face was expressionless. His cold eyes looked past the old general to look at the imperial palace behind him, completely ignoring the old general. The old general glanced at the 20 Earth Saint Masters on the ground, and his expression became unprecedentedly serious. He then stared closely at Jinshan's young face, his heart becoming more and more shocked. The old general found it hard to believe that at such a young age, he could easily kill 20 Earth Saint Masters. This was because he knew that to kill 20 Earth Saint Masters in such a short period of time, one had to be at least a Heaven Saint Master. Could it be that this young man in front of him, who looked like he was in his 20s, had the strength of a Heaven Saint Master? Once he thought of this, the old general could not calm down. If his guess was correct, then the talent of this person in front of him was just too terrifying. "Your Excellency, who are you? Why did you destroy my Pingyang Kingdom's imperial palace?" The old general was very fearful of Jinshan's strength. Deep in his heart, he did not want to become enemies with Jinshan. Jinshan looked at the imperial palace of Pingyang indifferently and said softly, "From today onwards, this imperial palace will completely disappear from the Tianyuan continent." Hearing Jinshan's words, the old general was enraged. He shouted, "What arrogance! My Pingyang Kingdom has stood tall in the Tianyuan continent for hundreds of years. How can it be overthrown by a child like you?" Jianshan did not say anything. He slowly opened his hands, and the fire element in the surroundings began to rapidly condense, forming a fiery red light that converged towards Jianshan. Very quickly, a thick wall of fire formed around Jianshan's body. The scorching heat caused the temperature of the surroundings to rise rapidly. Very quickly, it reached an unbearable level. Seeing this, the old general's face finally changed. He immediately shouted in shock, "Retreat! Quickly retreat!" Although the old general was not a Heaven Saint Master, he was very clear about the strength of a Heaven Saint Master. Although the people gathered here were all elite guards of the Pingyang Kingdom, in front of a Heaven Saint Master, they were nothing. Hearing the old general's words, the surrounding soldiers did not hesitate and quickly retreated to the rear. However, it was too late. The flames that had condensed around Jinshin's body suddenly exploded, forming a fiery red wall of light that rapidly spread in all directions. The terrifying heat seemed to have evaporated the air. The entire area seemed to have become a large furnace, so hot that it was difficult to breathe. The waves of fire rapidly spread in all directions, swallowing a large number of soldiers in an instant. The terrifyingly high temperature burned the armor on their bodies red, and then turned them into molten iron that flowed down. Countless soldiers rolled in the sea of fire, letting out painful and miserable cries. The old general, who had luckily escaped death, looked at the scene in front of him with an extremely ugly expression. His eyes were somewhat dazed. At this moment, two powerful auras came from the depths of the palace, accompanied by a furious roar. Two Heaven Saint Masters quickly flew over from afar, hovering in the air as they looked down on the scene below. "Who are you? Why have you come to my Pingyang Kingdom's palace to cause trouble?" One of the Heaven Saint Masters glared at Jinshin and sternly asked. Although the other party had killed many soldiers, they had to get to the bottom of this matter. A layer of Wind Saint force enveloped Jinshin, allowing Jinshin to slowly rise from the ground, facing the two Heaven Saint Masters in the air. "I am a citizen of the Kingdom of Jessen. Today, I will make your Pingyang Kingdom pay for what you have done." Jinshin slowly opened his mouth. Although his voice was calm, it was filled with coldness, and a strong killing intent was revealed. Chapter 410. Hearing this, the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. Since when did the Kingdom of Jessen have such a genius? They had never even heard of such a person before. Jinshin did not waste any more words. Grabbing at the air before him, two burning fire elemental swords instantly condensed. They then shot toward the two Heaven Saint Masters as streaks of red light. The last two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom did not say much either. Now that they knew that Jinshin was from the Kingdom of Jessen, they understood that this battle was unavoidable. Either one of them would die. So the two Heaven Saint Masters did not hold back and used their saint weapons to block the incoming fire elemental swords. With a loud bang, the fire elemental swords that Jinshin had condensed were shattered, turning into flames that filled the air. The two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom did not dodge. Instead, they protected themselves with a layer of saint force and directly charged into the sea of flames towards Jinshin. Jinshin remained expressionless as he hovered in the air. Although the flames had swallowed the two Heaven Saint Masters, his soul was extremely powerful. The movements of the two Heaven Saint Masters were clearly imprinted into Jinshin's mind like a picture. A pure purple and green light appeared in Jinshin's hand, quickly condensing into a sword. Jinshin planned to end this battle quickly, and the only way to end this battle quickly was to use the origin energy of the sword spirits. Just as the sword spirits finished condensing their origin energy, the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom charged out of the sea of flames and arrived in front of Jinshin like lightning. Their two saint weapons carried a powerful pressure of the world as they slashed towards Jinshin. For the first time, the two Heaven Saint Masters had used an Earth-tier battle skill without prior agreement. A bright light flashed in Jinshin's eyes. Although he had lost his saint force, using the chaotic force to refine his body had already made his body extremely strong. Just by relying on the strength of his body, he could unleash an extremely fast speed. With a flash of azure light, Jinshin stabbed out twice with the origin energy of the sword spirits in his right hand, colliding with the saint weapons of the two Heaven Saint Masters. The Earth-rank battle skill's power spread out in all directions from the point of contact, causing Jinshin and the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom to be pushed back. As they retreated, the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom both spat out a mouthful of blood. Their faces instantly paled as they stared at the saint weapons in their hands in shock. Their faces were filled with disbelief. On the saint weapons in their hands, there was already a 2-finger-size gap. The damage to the saint weapons had also affected them, causing them to be heavily injured. The two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Shortly after, one of them immediately yelled, "Immediately activate the highest security alert." In the distance, in a huge palace, there was a group of people standing in front of the palace, watching the battle in the sky. This group of people fanned out and protected an old man in a purple gold dragon robe. Every one of them had a serious expression. The old man in the purple gold dragon robe was the king of the Pingyang Kingdom, and the group of people beside him were his personal guards. However, when they heard the words of the Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom, their faces suddenly changed. "Highest security alert. Not good. Your Majesty, quickly go to the underground maze. Immediately protect your Majesty to the underground maze. Quick, quick, don't delay." The guard beside the king shouted in a low voice. Their tone was very urgent. Then, the group of people surrounded the king and quickly retreated into the depths of the palace, disappearing in the blink of an eye. In the sky, Jianshin used the origin energy of the Azure Sword Chi. The powerful attack made the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom unable to fight back. The two sides only exchanged a few blows before Jianshin killed the last two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom. With the death of the two Heaven Saint Masters, there was no one in the palace who could stop Jianshin's footsteps. Jianshin slowly descended from the sky and spread out his soul, covering a radius of 15 kilometers. Then, step by step, he walked towards the huge palace in the center of the Pingyang Kingdom. Very quickly, thousands of elite soldiers gathered around Jianshin, surrounding Jianshin so tightly that not even a drop of water could pass through. However, this group of soldiers did not dare to take a step forward when they were still 100 meters away from Jianshin. Their faces were filled with nervousness and fear as they looked at Jianshin, continuously retreating. No one dared to rush to their deaths. Jianshin did not kill them all. Under the encirclement of thousands of soldiers, he calmly entered the largest palace in the center of the Pingyang Kingdom. The soldiers all stopped outside the palace, nervously looking at Jianshin. No one dared to enter without permission. The scene of Jianshin killing the two state masters of the Pingyang Kingdom was clearly seen by all the soldiers. Such a shocking battle strength had already made this group of soldiers feel fear. If not for their daily training, they would have already fled due to the fear in their hearts. How would they dare to surround Jianshin? Although this was the first time Jianshin came to the palace of the Pingyang Kingdom, he was very clear about the layout of the palace. He directly walked to the dragon throne at the top of the main hall and pressed an inconspicuous button onto the throne. Following a series of cha-cha-cha sounds, the dragon throne began to slowly move. Finally, a 2-meter square black hole appeared, and a flight of stairs extended downwards. "Humph! No matter where you hide, don't even think about escaping from me." Jianshin sneered as he whispered in a low voice. Then, he directly walked down the hole. The hole was dark and damp, very deep. On both sides of the wall, there was a luminous pearl hanging there every 30 meters, providing a faint ray of light to the pitch-black tunnel. Jianshin followed the tunnel and dived for 1,000 meters before he finally reached the bottom. The ground here was not made of mud, but was completely made of steel. Jianshin's footsteps did not stop, and directly walked toward the passage in front of him. This was an underground labyrinth. The entire labyrinth was made of steel and buried deep underground. It was very sturdy. Even if the soil above collapsed, the people inside the labyrinth would not be harmed in the slightest. With the help of Jianshin's divine sense, Jianshin covered the entire labyrinth. This incomparably complex labyrinth had no secrets in his eyes. However, what made Jianshin surprised was that the entire labyrinth was actually alive. The iron walls inside could actually be controlled and moved at will. Now, the route of the entire labyrinth had undergone a huge change. forming a dead end. If one still followed the original route, they would never be able to get out. They would only keep going in circles inside the labyrinth, and the path leading to the deepest part of the labyrinth was completely blocked by an iron wall. Seeing this, Jianshun could not help but secretly click his tongue. He really struggled to imagine just how long it would take to create such a complex labyrinth of steel. Jianshun walked towards the depths of the labyrinth with great familiarity. Along the way, he used the azulate sword chi to cut a large hole in the wall that blocked his way. If it were a Heaven Saint Master, they would probably be trapped here for a very long time. However, it was completely useless in front of Jianshun. Suddenly, a faint gray mist appeared in the labyrinth and rapidly spread. Very soon, it filled every corner of the labyrinth. This was an extremely terrifying poison. Regular antidotes were completely useless against it. Although it could not directly kill an expert like a Heaven Saint Master, it would still greatly affect them as soon as they came into contact with it. Looking at the poisonous mist floating in the labyrinth, Jianshun's eyes revealed a trace of disdain. He had a body that was impervious to poison. In the world, there were only a few poisons that could pose a threat to him. Jianshun was not affected at all as he walked towards the depths of the labyrinth. Along the way, he would easily use the azulate sword chi to cut a large hole in the wall that blocked his way. At this moment, in the depths of the labyrinth, the king of the Pingyang kingdom and 30 or so loyal guards were in a completely sealed space. Each of them had a serious expression on their faces. The place they were in was the safest place in the labyrinth. Surrounding them were steel walls that were a terrifying 10 meters thick. Even a Heaven Saint Master would find it difficult to break through them. Staying here could be said to be very safe. Moreover, there is a large amount of food stored inside, enough for 100 people to survive for several years. Who was that person? How could his strength be so terrifying? Even the two imperial advisors could not stop him. The king of the Pingyang kingdom muttered with a pale face. "Your Majesty, I believe that person is most likely someone from the kingdom of Jessen. Since we are currently at war with the kingdom of Jessen, it is reasonable for them to send experts to seek revenge." One of the guards said. The king of the Pingyang kingdom nodded slightly and said, "You are right. However, I do not know if that person will find this place." The king's face was filled with worry. "Your Majesty, do not worry. This labyrinth is extremely sturdy. Moreover, the path has been changed. In addition, the entrance is very well hidden. Unless there is a spy in our kingdom, he will not be able to find this place." One of the guards said. These people were the king's personal guards. They were loyal to the king and were highly regarded by the king. "Your Majesty, you do not need to worry. Soon, the experts stationed at the border fortress will arrive. When that time comes, the expert from the kingdom of Jessen will only be able to escape." One of the guards said with a serious face. Until now, they still did not know that the Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang kingdom had all been killed in battle. This was because the news of what happened at the border fortress had not yet reached here. Jianshun broke through one wall after another. After a few kilometers, he finally arrived at the deepest part of the labyrinth. He arrived in front of a shiny and thick steel wall. Chapter 411. Jianshun didn't hold back at all. With a flick of his finger, a ray of azure and violet sword chi shot out from his fingertips and killed every single one of the great Saint Master guards. Under this wave of attacks, only 3 Earth Saint Master guards had managed to survive. "Your Majesty, hurry up and run. We'll stall him." The 3 Earth Saint Master guards didn't cower in the slightest and immediately leapt at Jianshun to use their bodies to block him so that the king could escape. The king of the Pingyang kingdom looked at his dead guards with a pained expression. He didn't choose to run away because he knew that he wouldn't be able to escape and that it would only be a waste of energy. "Stop!" The king of the Pingyang kingdom suddenly spoke up to stop the 3 guards. His voice was weak and lacking in energy. Looking at Jianshun, he spoke. "This king has been forced into a corner by you. There is no hope for me to escape. Could you please tell me who you are? Even if I die, I will die in peace." Jianshun looked emotionlessly at the king of the Pingyang kingdom. "Who I am is not important. All you need to know is that I am a citizen of the Jessen Kingdom. Just as I thought, you really are from the Jessen Kingdom. The king of the Pingyang Kingdom let out a long sigh as he looked at Jianshun. It would appear that this king's decision to ally with the other three kingdoms to attack the Jessen Kingdom was a mistake. I had thought this would be a sure win, but who would have thought that the Jessen Kingdom would have such a strong expert hidden within? To think that one person would be able to break into the imperial palace of my Pingyang Kingdom and force this king to this point. I, the king of the Pingyang Kingdom, grew even more depressed. In that moment, it seemed as if he had aged a lot and his entire person had become listless. This king has already become your prisoner. This king is willing to cooperate with you in any decision you make. If you wish to kill me, I will do as you please. However, this king begs you to forgive my guards. They are all innocent. The king pleaded with Jianshun. Your Majesty, this servant's mission is to protect your Majesty. The three of us do not fear death. The three guards were moved by his Majesty's words. They all knelt down on one knee and spoke passionately. They had already disregarded their own lives. The king shook his head. This war is all on this king's shoulders. The consequences should be borne by this king. It has nothing to do with you. Besides, you have your own families and children to take care of. At the mention of family and children, the three guards had a complicated look on their faces as tears began to well up in their eyes. Jianshun's eyes grew even more complicated as well. The king's words of family and children caused Jianshun to think about them. Jianshun couldn't help but think about his family back in the Changyang clan. The king looked at Jianshun with a pleading look. This is all my fault. This king will immediately order my Pingyang Kingdom to retreat. I only hope that you will forgive my three guards. Jianshun looked at the three guards and saw that they were all pale in the face. When they had tried to block Jianshun's azure and violet sword Qi, they had suffered some injuries. Jianshun hesitated for a moment before finally agreeing to the king's proposal. I can forgive them, but if the three of them dare to do anything to harm the Jessen Kingdom in the future, then they will have to blame me for being ruthless. The king let out a sigh of relief. These 30 guards had already followed him for 20 years and had always protected him in silence. Although they were master and servant, their relationship was very deep. The king didn't want to see these guards who had once protected him die in front of his eyes. He knew just how strong Jianshun was, and if even a Heaven Saint Master couldn't stop him, then how could these 3 Earth Saint Master guards stop him? They would only be sending themselves to their deaths. Jianshun didn't kill the king of the Pingyang Kingdom. Instead, he grabbed the king's shoulder and left the area, leaving behind the 3 guards who were lucky enough to survive. Your Majesty! The 3 guards had hot tears in their eyes as they watched the king leave. Although they wanted to rush forward and save the king, they didn't have the ability to do so. Jianshun grabbed the king of the Pingyang Kingdom and quickly left the underground labyrinth. Reappearing in front of the Grand Hall, the hall was already filled with armored men. Every single one of them was a commander with a high status, and there were even a few elders that were high-ranking generals. Seeing Jianshun emerge from the hole, all the generals in the hall immediately grew nervous. Many of them had already pulled out their saint weapons, planning to stop Jianshun even if they had to risk their lives. They had already sent word that the experts stationed at the border of the stronghold would return soon. However, when an old man in a purplish-gold dragon robe walked out of the hole, everyone's expressions changed drastically. With their intelligence, they knew without even thinking that the king had been captured by the old man. Seeing the entire hall filled with officials and elite soldiers, the captured king let out a long sigh. Quickly giving the order for all of the soldiers to retreat, the king immediately issued an imperial decree to recall all of the soldiers that were gathered at the northern border of the Jessen Kingdom. After the imperial decree was given, the king turned to look at Jianshun. What do you want me to do now? Jianshun's display of strength had already caused the king to admit defeat. The king knew that if he didn't cooperate, then even more people would be implicated. Perhaps even the imperial palace would be bathed in blood, because there were far too many examples of this happening on the Tianyuan continent. Take me to the imperial treasury. Jianshun spoke. Hearing this, everyone's faces blanched. Immediately, a scholarly-looking elder spoke up. "No, the imperial treasury is the source of our kingdom's wealth. If the imperial treasury is robbed, then we PCHD." Before the elder could finish speaking, Jianshun had already shot out a beam of azure and violet sword chi that pierced through his head, killing him on the spot. Prime Minister, many of the officials and generals cried out sorrowfully as they looked at Jianshun with eyes filled with anger. Grandfather, several of the younger generals cried out in grief as they drew out their saint weapons. Their eyes flashed with hatred as they roared out, "We'll fight you to the death." With that, the generals charged at Jianshun. "You can't! Everyone stand down!" The king cried out, but it was too late. Jianshun didn't hold back at all. Pointing out with his finger, several beams of azure and violet sword chi shot out and pierced through the throats of the generals, staining the entire hall with blood. "Stand down! Everyone stand down! No one is to act blindly without thinking." The king cried out anxiously. The people in the hall were all high-ranking members of the Pingyang kingdom and were the pillars of the kingdom. If they were to be lost, then the Pingyang kingdom would only exist in name. Afraid that Jianshun would kill everyone in the hall in a fit of rage, he hurriedly replied, "This king will take you to the treasury. No one is to stop us. Anyone who disobeys will be executed." Afterward, the king of the Pingyang kingdom led Jianshun to the treasury. Behind the two of them, a large group of soldiers followed closely behind them with nervous expressions on their faces. Very quickly, Jianshun was led by the king to the treasury. The king commanded the guards to open the gates and walk in with Jianshun. The treasury of the Pingyang kingdom was located within the royal palace. It was an extremely large underground space with several different areas where all sorts of resources were stored. Jianshun brought the king to the area where the monster cores were stored. This was an extremely large room with several large wooden boxes that were at least a meter tall. Each box was emitting a large amount of energy, and at the very center, several space belts were hung on a metal rack. Jianshun swept out his presence to look at the monster cores within the boxes. He could see that all of the monster cores in the boxes were Class 1 and Class 2 monster cores, and there were so many of them that it was impossible to count. Jianshun walked up to the innermost shelf that had several dozen space belts hanging on it. Noticing that each space belt had a note attached to it that stated the item's name and quantity. There are a total of 500 Class 3 monster cores. There are a total of 621 Class 3 monster cores. There are a total of 1,000 Class 3 monster cores. There are a total of 700 Class 4 monster cores. There are a total of 530 Class 4 monster cores. Within the dozens of space belts, there were Class 3, Class 4, and Class 5 monster cores. Each space belt had at least 500 monster cores, with the most Class 3 monster cores being around 60 to 70,000. The Class 4 monster cores were relatively few at around 10,000, and the Class 5 monster cores were the least at a mere 400. Seeing the number of monster cores on the space belts, Jianshun couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The amount of monster cores here had reached a frightening level, causing Jianshun to feel tongue-tied. However, when he thought about how the Pingyang kingdom had a population of 700 million, he felt at ease. This was the treasury of the Pingyang kingdom, and with the population of the Pingyang kingdom, there wouldn't be a single ripple in the treasury. Perhaps this was the result of the Pingyang kingdom's 10 or even 100 years of accumulation. Jianshun stored all of the space belts into his space ring. Even the wooden boxes with the Class 1 and Class 2 monster cores were not spared. It was a good thing that he had several space rings on him, so there was enough space to store all of these items. Seeing the monster cores being taken away by Jianshun, the king couldn't help but feel like crying. After this calamity, even if the Pingyang kingdom wasn't destroyed, it would be a long time before the kingdom's strength would be at an all-time low. Afterward, Jianshun went to the treasury and took away all of the space belts. With a large amount of purple coins, he estimated that there were at least 100 million purple coins. This was practically the entire wealth of the Pingyang kingdom. Chapter 412. Within the northern fort of the Jessen kingdom, the situation had stabilized for the time being. All of the injured soldiers had begun to tend to their wounds, while a few Radiant Saint Masters were constantly using their Radiant Saint Force to heal the injured generals. On the walls, groups of bandaged soldiers patrolled the area. Currently, the heads of the 9 enemy experts were hanging on the walls, greatly boosting the morale of the soldiers. On both sides of the walls, a large number of craftsmen were busy repairing the walls. Countless 1-meter square stones were pulled up from the back to fix the broken parts of the walls. Outside the fortress, several thousand soldiers of the Kingdom of Jessin were digging a few large pits in the distance to bury the bodies of the fallen soldiers. Currently, the army of the Kingdom of Pingyang had retreated to a distance of 30 kilometers and was not moving at all. Clearly, the death of the Heaven Saint Masters had a huge impact on their morale. In the fortress, there were over 30 armored officers gathered together. Every one of them had a solemn expression on their faces. "Everyone, I have just received a message from the eastern, southern, and western fortresses. The enemy has already broken through 3 of our border fortresses and is marching towards the royal capital. Our soldiers have suffered heavy casualties. Another Heaven Saint Master has died at the hands of the enemy. The other Heaven Saint Masters have also been heavily injured. The situation is extremely dangerous," an old man said solemnly as he looked at the crowd. Hearing this, the faces of everyone present turned incomparably solemn. The strongholds in the east, west, and east had already been breached. If they didn't stop it, once the army breached the imperial city, the Jessin kingdom would be completely finished. It seems like even if the imperial advisor of the Qin Empire hurries over to help, it will be useless. The difference in the number of experts on both sides is just too great. With just the 5 of them, it will be difficult to turn the situation around on the general side. I hope the Qin Empire's state preceptor can use the might of the Qin Empire to deter the enemy's army. I believe they won't dare to offend the Qin Empire. Otherwise, the Qin Empire would only need 1 million elite soldiers to flatten the 4 kingdoms. I don't think it's that simple. Everyone knows that the Qin Empire is very far away from here, and the Kingdom of Jessin has never crossed paths with the Qin Empire before. I don't think the enemy will believe the identities of the 5 grand advisors of the Qin Empire. They will only think that they are reinforcements that the Kingdom of Jessin has found. That makes a lot of sense. I think that's most likely the case. Since the Qin Empire's national prestige can't deter them, what should we do now? Once the imperial city is breached, what's the point of us staying here? In the end, we can only surrender obediently. The generals all began to discuss intensely. Everyone spoke one after another about the possible situations that they might face. The situation was very critical. For now, the northern fortress can only send a group of troops to assist the eastern, southern, western, and northern fortresses. Everyone, what do you think? An old general voiced his opinion. Hearing this, everyone frowned. After a short moment of silence, one of the generals said, "But our northern fortress only has a total of less than 3 million soldiers. Most of them are exhausted and injured. Furthermore, they are formed by countless mercenaries and lack discipline. I don't think that even if we send the vanguard of this army over, we will be able to save the situation. This is our only choice." I agree with this suggestion. That's right. We can only do this. The situation at the northern fort has stabilized. 8 Heaven Saint Masters from the Kingdom of Pingyang have already died. There are only 2 left in the Imperial Palace. I don't think they will act rashly. We can send a part of our army to assist the other 3 fortresses. Although we won't be able to stop the enemy, we can at least delay them for a while. After an intense discussion, the generals finally came to a decision. A few of the stronger generals who were not heavily injured would lead a group of 2 million soldiers to the other 3 fortresses. A large portion of the Radiant Saint Masters guarding the northern fort was also sent away. Less than a third of them were left in the northern fort. Soon after, the 2 Heaven Saint Masters in the northern fort received the news as well. Chang Wuji and Kafir ignored their wounds that had not healed completely and immediately hurried to the eastern fort. Everyone from the Changyang clan followed them. With the departure of the 2 million-strong army, the northern fortress had become somewhat empty. There were only a few 100,000 soldiers left, and They were all injured or disabled. The departure of the 2 million soldiers from the northern fort, naturally, could not be hidden from the people of the Pingyang Kingdom. In a large tent in the Pingyang Kingdom, more than a dozen generals of different ages were gathered together. Their faces were filled with grief and indignation because many of the dead Heaven Saint Masters were seniors in their clans. General Hong, what are you hesitating for? Right now, the Kingdom of Jesson is only left with a few injured soldiers. You should just give the order to attack. This time, we must break through the northern fort and hang the heads of all the Heaven Saint Masters in the Kingdom of Jesson on the walls to avenge my grandfather. No, we have already suffered heavy losses. We have indirectly caused the death of 8 Heaven Saint Masters. Our strength is not even half of what it used to be. What we need to think about now is not how to take down the Kingdom of Jesson, but how to protect ourselves, the armored general said with a heavy voice. His face was extremely solemn. With the death of 8 Heaven Saint Masters in the Kingdom of Pingyang, the peak experts in the Kingdom of Pingyang were basically empty. A kingdom like this no longer had any deterrence. As soon as the old general finished speaking, a middle-aged man chimed in. Old General Hong is right. Right now, our kingdom only has 2 Heaven Saint Masters left. Once the Hidden Dragon Kingdom, the Blue Wind Kingdom, and the All's Kingdom invade the Jesson Kingdom, who can guarantee that they won't take advantage of the fact that our Pingyang Kingdom's strength is greatly weakened to attack us? Are we not going to avenge my grandfather? The general who lost his grandfather was extremely angry and said with indignation, Don't worry, the Kingdom of Jesson is destined to be destroyed this time. All the Heaven Saint Masters will be killed as well. Don't tell me you want to kill a Heaven Saint Master with the strength of an Earth Saint Master? A general said with a cold expression. Hearing this, the general who lost his grandfather secretly sighed. He also understood that he would not be able to kill his enemy with his own hands. In the end, the army of the Kingdom of Pingyang did not attack the northern stronghold of the Kingdom of Jesson due to various reasons. They only stayed 30 kilometers away from the Kingdom of Jesson's border and did not move. However, not long after, the news of the destruction of the border stronghold of the Kingdom of Pingyang reached the front lines. The main point of the news was that an unknown Heaven Saint Master had broken into the territory of the Kingdom of Pingyang and was heading straight for the royal capital. This news shocked the general who was in the middle of the battle. He immediately ordered the army to retreat. In the underground labyrinth, the king of the Kingdom of Pingyang and his bodyguards were all frowning as they stayed in a sealed space. Their eyes were focused on a piece of jade on the table. This type of jade was a special stone found in the Tian-Yuan continent. It was known as the mother-child twin jade. There were 2 pieces in total. Once one of the pieces was broken, the other would also shatter at the same time. The piece in the underground labyrinth was the mother-child jade. There was also a mother-child jade that was placed in a very secret place in the royal palace. Only a few important people knew about it. Once the crisis of the Kingdom of Pingyang was resolved, the people outside would take the mother-child jade and crush it to inform the king hiding in the underground labyrinth. Currently, the king and his bodyguards who were hiding in the depths of the labyrinth were all hoping that the mother-child jade would shatter quickly. At this moment, a strange sound suddenly entered the ears of the king and his bodyguards. They immediately looked towards the source of the sound with a strange expression. In front of them, there was a 10-meter thick steel wall. Suddenly, there was a thick purple and green light. Everyone's expression changed. Their eyes were filled with shock and confusion as they looked at the purple and green light. Although they did not know what it was, they had a bad premonition in their hearts. What is that thing? The king found it difficult to remain calm. With a dignified expression, he shouted in a low voice. No one replied to the king. Hiding in a completely sealed space, they had no way of knowing what was going on outside. At this time, the purplish-green light that had broken through the wall suddenly moved slowly. It actually drew a circle with a diameter of 2 meters on the steel wall. Wherever the purplish-green light passed, a crack would appear on the steel wall. Oh no, the wall's about to break through, one of the bodyguards cried out. A guard involuntarily cried out. His face was filled with unconcealable fear. The wall was 10 meters thick and could stop Heaven Saint Masters, yet it had been broken through so easily by the enemy. Just how powerful was the enemy? The group of bodyguards immediately became nervous. They protected the king as they constantly retreated. They sternly stared at the purple and green light that had broken through the wall. Impossible. How could the wall be broken through so easily? Is the enemy a saint ruler? The king's face was filled with unconcealable shock as he spoke with a trembling voice. Boom! Just as His Majesty's voice fell, a muffled sound suddenly rang out. A huge iron pillar, 2 meters wide and 10 meters long, flew out from the wall and fell to the ground with a loud bang. The strong vibration caused the entire underground maze to tremble a few times. At the location where the pillar flew out, there was already a 2-meter-high passage that led to the outside. At this moment, a light sound of footsteps rang out in the quiet underground labyrinth. A young man wearing a white robe, stained with blood, slowly walked in from the outside. The young man was not very old, at most in his 20s. He had short hair that was less than an inch long and a resolute face. He was very handsome. His Majesty the King and the dozens of personal guards looked at the young man walking out of the passage in horror, and they kept retreating. Who are you? The king asked with a trembling voice. Jianshun did not say a word. He coldly stared at the king. The king of the Pingyang Kingdom was a senile old man. He wore a purple and gold dragon robe and a purple and gold crown on his head. Having been in a high position for a long time, he imperceptibly gave off the aura of a superior. Although his face was filled with fear, His Majesty was not reduced by much. Jianshun took large strides forward and approached the king. Soon, the group of bodyguards was forced into a corner. Protect the king. A bodyguard suppressed the fear in his heart and roared. He then fearlessly rushed towards Jianshun. With one person taking the lead, the others behind did not want to fall behind. They all disregarded their lives and quickly rushed towards Jianshun. Chapter 4:13. Jianshun did not show any mercy. With a flick of his finger, rays of purple and green sword chi shot out from his fingertips and killed all the great Saint Master Guards. Only 3 Earth Saint Master Guards managed to survive this round of attacks. Your Majesty, run? We'll hold it back. The 3 Earth Saint Master Guards were not afraid at all. They immediately threw themselves at Jianshun and used their bodies to block Jianshun, giving the king time to escape. The king of the Pingyang Kingdom looked at the dead guards with a pained expression. He did not choose to run because he knew that he could not escape at all. It would be a waste of energy. Stop! The king of Pingyang Kingdom suddenly spoke to stop the 3 guards who were rushing forward. His voice was so weak that it sounded as if he was lacking in strength. Afterwards, he looked at Jianshun in agony and said, I've already been forced to such a state by you. It's impossible for me to escape. Can you tell me who you are? Even if I die, at least let me die in peace. Jianshun looked at the king of the Pingyang Kingdom expressionlessly and said, Who I am is not important. You only need to know that I am from the kingdom of Jessen. Just as I expected, you really are from the kingdom of Jessen. The king of the Pingyang Kingdom let out a long sigh. He looked at Jianshun with a complicated expression and said, It seems that this king's decision to attack the kingdom of Jessen with the other 3 kingdoms was a mistake. I thought that this matter was in the bag, but I did not expect that there was a powerful expert hidden in the kingdom of Jessen. He actually broke into the palace of the Pingyang Kingdom alone and forced this king to this point. Sigh. The king of the Pingyang Kingdom became very depressed. At this moment, he seemed to have aged a lot and became listless. This king is now your prisoner. This king is willing to cooperate with you to make any decision that I can accept. You can kill me or torture me as you wish, but this king begs you to forgive these guards beside me. They are all innocent. The king looked at Jianshun with a pleading expression. Your Majesty, our mission is to protect your Majesty's safety. The 3 of us are not afraid of death. The 3 guards were moved by the king's words. They all knelt down on one knee and spoke in impassioned tones. They had already disregarded life and death. The king shook his head and said, This war started because all the sins are on this king, so the consequences should be borne by this king. It has nothing to do with you. Besides, All of you have your own families and children to take care of." Upon hearing the words family and children, the expressions of the three guards immediately became complicated. Their eyes were faintly glistening with tears. The look in Jinshin's eyes became a little complicated, and the light in his eyes flickered. The king mentioned family and children. Jinshin couldn't help but think of his family in Chanyang Prefecture. The king looked at Jinshin with pleading eyes and said, "This is all my fault. This king will immediately order the Pingyang kingdom to withdraw their troops. I only hope that you can forgive these three guards of mine." Jinshin's gaze swept across the three guards. The three of them were pale. Previously, when they blocked Jinshin's sword chi attack, they had already suffered some injuries. Jinshin hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he agreed to the king's suggestion and said, "I can forgive them. However, if the three of them dare to do anything that will harm the kingdom of Jessen in the future, they can't blame me for being cruel." The king let out a sigh of relief. These 30 guards had already followed him for 20 years and had always been silently protecting him. Although they were master and servant, the relationship between them was very deep. The king also didn't want to see all of his guards die in front of his eyes. This was because he knew how strong Jinshin was. If even a Heaven Saint Master couldn't stop him, how could 3 mere Earth Saint Masters be able to stop him? They would only be throwing their lives away. Jinshin didn't kill the king of Pingyang Kingdom. He grabbed the king's shoulder and left, leaving behind the 3 guards who were lucky enough to survive, standing there with a sorrowful expression. "Your Majesty." The 3 guards' eyes were filled with hot tears as they watched the king's figure disappear into the distance. Although they wanted to rush forward and save the king, they simply didn't have the ability to do so. After capturing the king of Pingyang Kingdom, Jinshin quickly left the underground maze and reappeared in front of the majestic hall. Now, the hall was filled with people wearing helmets and armors. Every single one of them was a high-ranking person. There were even a few old men who were high-ranking generals. Seeing Jinshin walk out of the hole, all the generals in the hall immediately became nervous. Many of them had already taken out their saint weapons, planning to stop Jinshin even if they had to risk their lives. This was because they had already sent out a message, and soon the expert stationed at the border of the stronghold would return. However, when an old man wearing a purple gold dragon robe walked out of the cave, everyone's expression changed drastically. With their shrewdness, they didn't need to think to know that His Majesty had been captured by the other party. Looking at the high-ranking officials and a large number of elite soldiers in the hall, the captured king looked up to the sky and sighed. He then quickly ordered all the soldiers to retreat. Without Jinshin's order, the king immediately issued an imperial edict to withdraw the army gathered at the northern border of the kingdom of Jessen. After the imperial edict was issued, the king turned his head to look at Jinshin and said, "Now, what do you want this king to do?" Jinshin's display of strength had completely made the king admit defeat. This was because the king was very clear that if he didn't cooperate, it would cause more people to be implicated. He might even do something like massacring the royal palace. This happened too many times in the Tianyuan continent. "Take me to the national treasury," Jinshin said expressionlessly. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed. Immediately, a weak old man said, "No, the national treasury is the source of our kingdom's financial resources. Once the national treasury is ransacked, pooh." Before the old man could finish his words, Jinshin shot out an azure sword chi and pierced through the old man's head. He fell to the ground and died on the spot. Prime Minister, many officials, and generals cried out in grief. Soon after, they looked at Jinshin with eyes full of anger. "Grandfather!" Several young generals were filled with grief. They immediately took out their saint weapons. Their eyes flashed with hatred and anger. They shouted, "I'll kill you!" After saying that, they rushed towards Jinshin. "No, all of you retreat." The king immediately called out, but unfortunately, it was already too late. Jinshin did not hold back at all. He extended his finger and a few strands of azulite sword chi shot out, piercing the throats of the generals who had charged over. Blood dyed the hall. "Retreat! All of you retreat. Do not act rashly," the king shouted anxiously. These people in the main hall were all high-ranking officials of the kingdom of Pingyang. They were the pillars of the kingdom, and they couldn't afford to lose them. Otherwise, the kingdom of Pingyang would only exist in name. Then, as if he was afraid that Jianshan would kill everyone in the hall in anger, he hurriedly said, "This king will now take you to the national treasury. No one can stop us. Those who disobey will be beheaded." Afterwards, the king of the Pingyang kingdom personally led the way to the national treasury. Behind the two of them, a large group of fully armed generals and elite soldiers followed closely behind. Every one of them had a nervous expression on their faces. Soon, Jianshan was led by the king to the national treasury. The king ordered the guards to open the door and then walked in with Jianshan. The national treasury of the Pingyang kingdom was built in the royal palace. It was a very large underground space. It was divided into several areas, storing different kinds of materials. Jianshan led the king of the Pingyang kingdom into the area where the magic nuclei were stored. This was a very spacious room. In the middle of the room, there were dozens of large wooden boxes that were 1 meter in length and width. They were emitting powerful energy waves. In the innermost part of the room, dozens of space belts were hanging on a metal rack. Jianshan's divine sense directly penetrated the wooden boxes to observe the magic nuclei. He found that the magic nuclei in the wooden boxes were all first and second order magic nuclei. There were so many magic nuclei that it was impossible to calculate. Jianshan came to the innermost area where dozens of spatial belts were hanging on the metal rack. He found that each belt was pasted with a note. On the note, the name and quantity of the magic nuclei were recorded. A total of 500 third-order magic nuclei. A total of 621 third-order magic nuclei. A total of 1,000 third-order magic nuclei. A total of 700 fourth-order magic nuclei. A total of 534th-order magic nuclei. The dozens of spatial belts contained 3rd rank, 4th rank, and 5th rank monster cores. Each spatial belt contained at least 500 monster cores. Among them, the 3rd rank monster cores were the most numerous. Based on a rough estimate, there were at least 60 to 70,000 monster cores. As for the 4th rank monster cores, there were relatively fewer, about 10,000. Looking at the number of magic nuclei marked on the spatial belts, even with Jianshan's calmness, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The number of magic nuclei here had reached a frightening level. Jianshan was dumbfounded. However, when he thought of the 700 million population of the Pingyang kingdom, he felt relieved. This was the treasury of the Pingyang kingdom. With the population of the Pingyang kingdom, throwing out this pile of magic nuclei wouldn't cause the slightest ripple. Perhaps this batch of magic nuclei was the result of the Pingyang kingdom's savings over a few decades or even hundreds of years. Jianshan put all the spatial belts filled with magic nuclei into his spatial ring. As for the dozens of first-order and second-order magic nuclei placed in the middle, he didn't let go of them either. Fortunately, he had several spatial rings on him. The space was large enough to store these things. Seeing Jianshan take away all the magic nuclei, the king could only cry without tears. He sighed in his heart. After this disaster, even if the Pingyang kingdom didn't fall, its national strength would decline for a long time. Next, Jianshan went to the treasury where the money was stored. He took away all the spatial belts and obtained a large amount of purple gold coins. Conservatively speaking, there were at least 100 million purple gold coins. This was almost all the wealth of the Pingyang kingdom. Chapter 414. Now, the king of the Pingyang kingdom had already prepared himself for Jianshan to loot the treasury. Although the emptiness of the treasury would be a great hindrance to the development of the Pingyang kingdom, it was still better than having all the officials killed. After all, the officials were the most powerful force in the kingdom. If all of them were killed, then there would be a gap in the management of the Pingyang kingdom. If the kingdom was not properly managed, then in this world where strength was respected, it would be a very frightening situation. After Jianshan looted the treasury where the purple coins were stored, he took a look around the treasury. There was nothing left that he was interested in. Jianshan brought the king of the Pingyang kingdom out of the treasury. As soon as they arrived outside, they were surrounded by tens of thousands of exquisite items. The ones standing at the front were all courageous old generals who were not afraid of death. "Sire, you have already gone to the treasury, and the imperial decree to retreat has been issued. Now, shouldn't you release the king?" An old general glared at Jianshan and said in a deep voice. Jianshan sneered and said, "Who said I'm going to let him go? He caused the deaths of millions of my kingdom of Jessan soldiers. If I let him go, those soldiers who died in battle will not be able to rest in peace. Those children who lost their father will never be able to forgive me." Jinshan's words caused the faces of the old generals to change. Immediately, one of the old generals said angrily, "Don't tell me you want to execute His Majesty? Aren't you afraid of angering the public? Aren't you afraid that my Pingyang kingdom will launch an all-out attack on your kingdom of Jessan?" Jinshan's eyes flashed with a fierce light. An intense killing intent spread out and enveloped the entire palace. He said in a cold voice, "Do you believe that I won't kill everyone in the palace right now?" Hearing this, the old general's body shook violently. He did not dare to say anything more. His eyes were filled with deep fear. If Jianshan really did purge the imperial palace, no one in the imperial palace would be able to stop him. After all, he was a terrifying expert who could easily slay two Heaven Saint Masters working together. After that, Jianshan did not say anything more. He grabbed the king's shoulder and flew into the sky. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the horizon, leaving behind a large group of soldiers who were staring blankly at the king. They could only helplessly watch the king being taken away. The group of old generals were filled with anger as they watched the king disappear into the horizon. Their eyes were empty and they were silent for a long time. After a long while, they let out a long sigh. Their expressions were very pessimistic. Although the Pingyang kingdom was not a superpower, it was still a relatively large kingdom with a population of more than 700 million. Today, a young expert had arrogantly barged into the palace and kidnapped the king in front of so many civil and military officials. To them, this was a great humiliation that could not be washed away. Jianshan grabbed the king of Pingyang Kingdom and flew quickly in the air. According to his original plan, he originally wanted to massacre the entire palace. However, the king's words in the underground maze deeply touched Jianshan's heartstrings. It made him realize that these ordinary soldiers also had families, parents, and children. Although killing them was just a thought, this thought had caused countless orphans and countless white-haired people to mourn the deaths of their children. Because of this and the words that Uncle Shio said to Jianshan in the longevity village, he changed his mind and gave up on the idea of massacring the royal palace. Unless there was no other choice, Jianshan did not want too many innocent people to die in his hands. Jianshan flew past cities of various sizes. After several hours of rushing, he finally arrived at the northern fortress of the Kingdom of Jessan in the evening. He then slowly landed on the walls under the terrified gazes of the soldiers. As soon as Jianshan landed on the walls, a group of injured soldiers quickly surrounded Jianshan. They all looked at Jianshan nervously, afraid that Jianshan was an enemy. An old general guarding the northern fortress received the news and quickly rushed over. He separated the crowd and looked at Jianshan with a serious and nervous expression. Now that all the experts in the northern fortress had left, if a Heaven Saint Master suddenly appeared at this time, the consequences would be unimaginable if he was an enemy. No one in the northern fortress would be able to defeat him. The old general's gaze swept past Jianshan and quickly landed on the king of Pingyang Kingdom. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. He then said in a deep voice, "King of Pingyang Kingdom, I did not expect you to come personally. State your purpose." The old general's expression was very ugly. He did not welcome these two uninvited guests. Jianshan knew that the old general had misunderstood. He cupped his hands and said, "General, you have misunderstood. The king of Pingyang Kingdom has been captured by me. He is now only a prisoner." "What? You were the one who captured the king of the Pingyang Kingdom?" The old general stared blankly at Jianshan, unable to believe his eyes. Yes, he was captured by me. I wonder if the 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire have arrived. Jianshan said calmly. Hearing Jianshan mention the Qin Empire's imperial advisors, the old general's expression changed slightly. He looked at Jianshan in a different light. He hurriedly and carefully asked, "Do you know the 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire?" "I came with the 5 of them from the Qin Empire. However, we separated halfway. The 5 of them came to assist the kingdom of Jessen while I went to the Pingyang kingdom," Jianshan said. Hearing this, the general seemed to have thought of something. He immediately became overjoyed and cried out, "Are you the young expert who beheaded the 4 heaven saint masters of the Pingyang kingdom?" Jianshan nodded and did not deny it. He said, "Yes, that is me." Having received confirmation, the old general was overjoyed. The worry in his heart was completely relieved. Then, the way he looked at Jianshan changed completely. After knowing that such a young heaven saint master was an ally, the nervous soldiers in the surroundings finally let out a sigh of relief. They could not help but smile with joy. They were excited to have another heaven saint master as an ally. This was because at this time, a heaven saint master would play a crucial role. Especially during a war, such a heaven saint master would be the spiritual pillar in the hearts of the soldiers. However, the expression of the king of the Pingyang kingdom who was standing beside him became ugly. The situation was worse than he imagined. He did not expect the kingdom of Jessen to have a relationship with the Qin Empire, one of the 8 strongest countries in the Tianyuan continent. The Qin Empire actually sent an imperial advisor to help. This was very bad news. In addition to this, the number of heaven saint masters that the Pingyang kingdom lost was far beyond his expectations. How many heaven saint masters died in the Pingyang kingdom? Although he was a captive, the king of the Qin Empire could not help but ask. Heaven saint masters were too important to a kingdom. Once the loss was too great, the Pingyang kingdom would not be able to bear it. Hearing this, the old general guarding the northern fort laughed and said, "Your Majesty, let this general calculate for you. 3 days ago, Senior Chang Wuji used a heaven-tier battle skill to kill 2 heaven saint masters of the Pingyang kingdom. This morning, Senior Chang Wuji brought back 4 heads of heaven saint masters from the Pingyang kingdom. After that, he used a heaven-tier battle skill to kill one of them. The last one, along with the 4 experts from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom, was captured by the imperial advisor of the Qin Empire. In the end, their heads were all hung on the city walls." Hearing this, the king of the Pingyang kingdom swayed and almost fell to the ground. The Pingyang kingdom only had a total of 10 heaven saint masters. Just outside the city walls, 8 of them had died. If the 2 heaven saint masters in the palace were included, then it would be exactly 10. In other words, the 10 heaven saint masters of the Pingyang kingdom were all dead. Such a huge loss almost made the king of the Pingyang kingdom faint. The old general coldly stared at the king of the Pingyang kingdom for a while. Then he clasped his hands towards Jianshan and said in an extremely polite tone, "Little brother, how would you like to deal with the king of the Pingyang kingdom?" Jianshan waved his hand and expressionlessly said, "His life and death is all up to you." The old general's face lit up with joy, and he said a few words of gratitude. He then immediately ordered a few soldiers to tie up the king of the Pingyang kingdom and guard him. Afterwards, Jianshan was warmly invited into the tower by the old general and was treated as a guest of honor. At the same time, all the generals stationed in the northern fortress came to see Jianshan. When they learned that Jianshan was the mysterious expert who had killed the 4 heaven saint masters of the Pingyang kingdom and even captured the king of the Pingyang kingdom, their gazes towards Jianshan underwent a huge change. They all looked at him with respect and envy. Jianshan sat on a stool and looked at the door with a complicated gaze. His eyes faintly revealed a sense of eagerness and expectation, mixed with some nervousness. The old general was very good at reading people's expressions. Jianshan's expression made him feel very puzzled, but he did not show it on his face. He smiled and said, "Little brother, may I ask if you are the imperial advisor of the Qin Empire?" Jianshan nodded absent-mindedly, and then immediately said, "Old general, may I ask if the people of Changyang Prefecture are here?" The old general was stunned. He shook his head. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint the imperial advisor. Due to the urgency of the battles in the eastern, southern, and western fortresses, the people of the Changyang clan and many experts have gone to reinforce them. Even the two Heaven Saint Masters guarding our northern fortress have gone with them. A sliver of disappointment appeared on Jinshin's face when he heard that. He continued to ask, has the first young master of Changyang Prefecture been sent away as well? The old general could not help but glance at Jinshin when he heard that. He said, the first young master of Changyang Prefecture had all 4 of his limbs severed. He was sent back to Changyang Prefecture in Lore City to recuperate at noon today. He is not here. Jinshin's questions made the old general feel very doubtful. The kingdom of Jessin and the Qin Empire had never interacted before. Yet today, several imperial advisors of the Qin Empire had suddenly come to assist the kingdom of Jessin in fending off the invaders. This had already puzzled the upper echelons of the northern fortress. They did not know why the imperial protector of the Qin Empire had sent people to assist the kingdom of Jessin. And now, the young man in front of him was also an imperial advisor of the Qin Wang Empire. Furthermore, he had asked about the Changyang clan as soon as he arrived, as if he was quite concerned about the Changyang clan. This caused the old general to begin guessing in his heart. Could it be that the Qin Wang Empire sending people to help the Jessin kingdom had something to do with this young man? Although he was doubtful, the old general did not dare to ask. He knew what he should ask and what he should not. Once he heard that the people of Changyang Prefecture had left, Jinshin's face was filled with unconcealable disappointment. The old general took in his expression and confirmed his guess. Chapter 4:15. Although the old general had his doubts, he didn't dare to ask. He knew what he should and shouldn't ask. Upon hearing that the people of Changyang Prefecture had left, Jinshin couldn't hide the disappointment on his face. The old general saw his expression and was even more certain of his guess. Imperial advisor, although we managed to hold on to the North Fortress, the other 3 fortresses in the east, south, and west have been breached by the enemy. The enemy is now advancing towards the imperial city. The kingdom of Jessin is still in a precarious situation. I hope that imperial advisor can lend us a hand and help the kingdom of Jessin overcome this crisis. The old general looked at Jinshin with a pleading expression. Although he hadn't seen Jinshin's strength with his own eyes, he had heard of it from Chang Wuji. Furthermore, Jinshin had infiltrated the imperial palace alone and captured the king of the Pingyang kingdom. This was proof of Jinshin's strength. If he was willing to lend a hand, it would be a great help to the kingdom of Jessin. Jinshin's expression turned serious when he heard the old general's words. He pondered for a moment and asked a few more questions. After inquiring about the latest situation of the 3 fortresses, he left the North Fortress and rushed to the West Fortress overnight. This was because he was the closest to the West Fortress, and the situation there was equally dangerous. Although Jinshin wanted to return to the kingdom of Jessin, he had to help the kingdom of Jessin overcome this crisis. Therefore, he could only suppress his homesickness and wait until everything calmed down before he could return. The North Fortress and the West Fortress of the kingdom of Jessin weren't too far apart. After 4 hours of flight, Jinshin arrived at the West Fortress. However, the fortress had already been breached by the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. The flag of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom had been planted on the dilapidated fortress. More than 1 million soldiers were stationed there. Behind them, large amounts of food and resources were being transported to the front lines through the West Fortress of the Kingdom of Jessin. The Hidden Dragon Kingdom's army had already entered the Kingdom of Jessin. This fortress was only a temporary supply depot, so Jinshin didn't encounter any Heaven Saint Masters. Jinshin hovered 1,000 meters in the air. It was completely dark now. The thick darkness of the night completely covered his body. The soldiers below didn't even notice a Heaven Saint Master hovering above them. Jinshin didn't stay for too long. Wrapping his body in wind elemental energy, he used the cover of the clouds in the sky to silently fly towards the kingdom of Jessin. An hour later, Jinshin arrived above a Class 2 city in the kingdom of Jessin. This Class 2 city was currently occupied by the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's army. The flag that originally belonged to the kingdom of Jessen had been replaced with the flag of the hidden dragon kingdom. Jinshin's eyes flickered. His gaze pierced through the darkness and clearly saw the situation below. He then followed the path of the hidden dragon kingdom's army. After flying like this for the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the sound of cannon fire could be faintly heard from the front. In front of them, the sky was filled with flames as balls of light shot out from the magic crystal cannons and bombarded the ground. Currently, the army of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom was engaged in a fierce battle with the army of the Jessen Kingdom. Jinshin didn't conceal his presence. His figure quickly swept past the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's army and flew towards the city in front of him. Currently, the Kingdom of Jessen's army was gathered in a Class 1 city. They were relying on the advantage of the city walls to resist the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's army. Jinshin's figure landed on the walls of a first-class city. Before his feet even touched the ground, dozens of crossbow bolts, each as thick as a person's wrist, shot towards him. The soldiers of the Jessen Kingdom had assumed that Jinshin was an enemy, so they didn't hold back in their attacks. With a thought from Jinshin, the several dozen crossbow bolts seemed to be blocked by an invisible force when they were 3 meters away from him. They were suspended in the air, unable to advance any further. In the end, they all lost their power and fell onto the city walls with a heavy thud. At this moment, 2 Heaven Saint Masters flew over from the city, one red and one yellow. They arrived before Jinshin in a short while. When they saw Jinshin's appearance, their faces immediately lit up with joy. They hurriedly arrived before Jinshin and clasped their hands. Greetings to Sir Imperial Protector. These 2 were the Imperial Protectors of the Qin Empire who had come with Jinshin. They were called Dongyi Junbai and Chao Kachin respectively. They were a 4th Cycle Heaven Saint Master and a 3rd Cycle Heaven Saint Master respectively. The soldiers all recognized the 2 of them. When they saw the 2 Heaven Saint Masters greet Jinshin, they immediately understood that this expert who had flown over from behind the enemy was on their side and not their enemy. Immediately, an inexplicable excitement appeared on their faces as they curiously studied Jinshin. Seeing the pale-faced Dongyi Junbai and Chao Kachin, Jinshin's face became stern. He asked, "Are the 2 of you injured?" The 2 of them nodded. Dongyi Junbai said, "Sir Imperial Protector, 2 of the experts from the Kingdom of Jessen guarding the Western Fort have already been killed by the people of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. The remaining one is heavily injured and is currently recuperating. He doesn't even have half of his strength left. On the other hand, the Hidden Dragon Kingdom has 5 Heaven Saint Masters. The 2 of us fought a great battle with the 5 of them not long ago. Although we repelled them, we also suffered some injuries." Jinshin nodded slightly. He then followed the 2 of them to a luxurious inn in the city. The inn was originally privately owned, but because it was very close to the battlefield, it was temporarily occupied by the army and turned into a temporary command post. Dongyi Junbai, Chao Kachin, and the injured Heaven Saint Master from the Kingdom of Jessen were all staying there. The personal arrival of the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire caused a huge commotion. All the powerful generals came to greet Jinshin. Even the injured Heaven Saint Master stopped healing. He looked at Jinshin with a pale face and constantly expressed his gratitude. Although Jinshin only seemed to be in his 20s, his status was still there. Moreover, the 2 Imperial Protectors of the Qin Empire treated him with great respect. As a result, none of the generals believed that Jinshin was really a young man in his 20s. After all, it was not like there were no secret methods to rejuvenate one's youth on the Tianyuan continent. All the powerful generals came to greet Jinshin. They all bowed and were extremely polite. They even spoke carefully, as if they were afraid of angering Jinshin if they said something wrong. Even the Heaven Saint Master guarding the Western Fort treated Jinshin with great respect. His face was filled with gratitude. As they conversed, Jinshin learned that the Heaven Saint Master was a member of the Imperial Palace. He was originally the commander of the steel-armored army. His name was Tian Xing, but after he broke through to Heaven Saint Master, his status changed. He became the Imperial Protector of the Kingdom of Jessen. He held great authority. Jinshin and the generals exchanged some pleasantries before getting to the main topic. They began to discuss how to deal with the current situation. Sir Imperial Protector, the enemy's army is several times stronger than ours. In terms of numbers, the Kingdom of Jessin will definitely lose. The only way to achieve victory is to kill all the enemy Heaven Saint Masters. That's right. Heaven Saint Masters are the mental support of every soldier in war. Once they fall, the soldiers will be greatly affected. If all the enemy Heaven Saint Masters are killed, the pressure we face will decrease by a lot. After that, we can capture the enemy commander and use him as a threat. The enemy will be defeated without even fighting. Several generals voiced their opinions one after another. Sir Imperial Protector, the enemy currently has 5 Heaven Saint Masters. 2 are in the 2nd cycle, 2 are in the 3rd cycle, and 1 is in the 4th cycle. If we work together and use our Heaven tier battle skills, we might really be able to kill them all, Chao Kachin said. That's right. Chao Kachin, and I can barely fight the 5 of them to a draw. If we have the assistance of Sir Imperial Protector, killing them all won't be impossible, Dong Junbai agreed. Hearing the conversation between the two, the generals all became excited. If all 5 of the enemy Heaven Saint Masters were killed, they would be able to turn the situation around. Jinshin nodded slightly after hearing everyone's suggestions. Everyone's thoughts were the same as his. He had originally planned to do this anyway. Jinshan slowly stood up and said, Dong Junbai, Chao Kachin, the 2 of you immediately go and treat your wounds. You must recover in the shortest amount of time. Then immediately head to the Eastern Fort to deal with the enemy. Sir Imperial Protector, do you want to deal with the experts of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom by yourself? Chao Kachin asked in surprise. Sir Imperial Protector, the enemy has 5 people. Although they don't have a Heaven tier battle skill, they're still very difficult to deal with if they work together. Let me and Chao Kachin work together with Sir Imperial Protector to deal with them. Dong Junbai stood up and said with a stern face. Jinshan shook his head and said, There's no need. I can deal with the 5 of them by myself. Time is of the essence right now. The situation in the other 2 directions is probably even more dangerous, so the 2 of you should head over as soon as possible. Jinshin's words shocked everyone present. The strength of the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire was far too terrifying to deal with 5 Heaven Saint Masters alone. However, the fact that the Qin Empire's Imperial Protector was willing to personally help the Kingdom of Jessin overcome this crisis made them extremely excited. It was as if they had entered a dream. Hearing Jinshin's words, Chao Kachin and Dong Junbai did not say anything else. They both excused themselves and went to treat their wounds. Afterwards, Jinshin also excused himself. After leaving the inn, he directly flew in the direction of the Eastern Fort. Now that the 5 Heaven Saint Masters of the Blue Wind Kingdom were injured, it was the perfect opportunity to kill them. Chapter 416. Tonight, the night was very dark. The sky was so dark that one couldn't even see one's own fingers. Thick dark clouds blocked the stars that should have appeared in the sky, so that the starlight and moonlight couldn't penetrate the thick dark clouds and sprinkle down. On the other hand, the battle at the front lines was extremely intense. As far as the eye could see, countless torches could be seen flickering everywhere. The Jessin Kingdom and the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's hundreds of thousands of soldiers were locked in an intense battle. Every second, every minute, there would be people dying. The ground had long since been dyed red with blood. Rivers of blood flowed on the city walls, and the corpses had long since been piled up into mountains. Boom, boom, boom. The magic crystal cannons set up on the city walls continuously shot out cannonballs with powerful energy fluctuations, bombarding the densely packed enemy forces. Every cannonball that landed would take the lives of several or even dozens of people. The enemy forces' corpses were badly mutilated, missing arms and legs. Some of the people who were directly hit by the magic crystal cannons even had their entire bodies turned into minced meat. It was a horrible sight to behold. The battle between the Kingdom of Hidden Dragon and the Kingdom of Jessin had been going on for an entire day. Both sides had suffered heavy casualties. At least 200,000 soldiers had lost their lives and were buried here forever. Charge! Kill! Deafening battle cries came from the front again. The kingdom of Hidden Dragon once again gathered 100,000 soldiers and rushed towards the city walls. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The sound of air being pierced was constantly heard. Steel crossbow bolts as thick as an arm were shot out like moths to a flame. These steel crossbow bolts were shot out by the strong tendon ballistae. They had very strong penetrative power and could pierce through several people's bodies. Following a series of screams, a large number of the enemy soldiers who were charging at the front fell down. After such a long battle, the kingdom of Jessin had almost used up all the magic crystal cannons and steel crossbow bolts. Some of the bolts that were shot out were from the city hall, while some were made by the craftsmen. There were only a few thousand bolts, and they were quickly used up by the hundreds of ballistae. Suddenly, a loud sound came. The city walls of the kingdom of Jessin were severely damaged. After being hit by a few magic crystal cannons shot by the kingdom of Hidden Dragon, a 30-meter-long section of the city wall collapsed. A large number of soldiers were buried, and a fault appeared on the city wall. Boom! Another loud sound came. A magic crystal cannon fired a cannon shell that bombarded the thick city gate. The heavily deformed gate was immediately blown away, and a large number of soldiers behind it were injured. Deafening battle cries rang out from the front. The army of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom was like a flood as they charged toward the broken city gate. A group of soldiers from the kingdom of Jessin immediately gathered at the city gate. They used their bodies to block the entrance, refusing to let the soldiers of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom enter the city. Very soon, the two sides began to engage in battle. The soldiers at the front were immediately hacked to death. It was a horrible sight. At this moment, a faint green light flew out from behind. It moved very quickly, arriving above the city wall in the blink of an eye. It hovered in the air as a huge presence spread out, enveloping a radius of over 10 kilometers. Before this presence, the space seemed to freeze. The air seemed to have been sucked away. The hundreds of thousands of soldiers felt like a huge rock was pressing down on their chests. Not only was it extremely uncomfortable, but it was also extremely difficult for them to breathe. The full force of a Heaven Saint Master's presence was something that even Earth Saint Masters would find difficult to endure, let alone these weak soldiers. Under the pressure of this presence, the two sides that were fiercely fighting could not help but stop. They could no longer pay attention to the enemy in front of them. Every single one of them had a red face as they revealed an extremely uncomfortable expression. Jianshun hovered in the air and let out a long howl. The sound shook the heavens and echoed through the entire sky. Even the thick layer of dark clouds in the sky was shaken away by the sound wave. The stars that filled the sky could be faintly seen. As for the soldiers below, they suffered even greater damage. Every one of them had lost their sense of hearing, and even their heads were buzzing. After the howl, Jianshun loudly yelled, "Heaven Saint Master of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom, come out and die." As soon as he finished speaking, Jianshun's body was wrapped in a layer of wind elemental energy. He turned into a dazzling green streak of light that streaked across the night sky like a meteor. He flew towards the camp of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. As if in response to Jianshun's challenge, 5 similarly powerful presences surged out from the camp of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. They blotted out the sky and covered the earth as they rushed towards Jianshun. Soon after, 5 figures wrapped in elemental energy slowly rose into the sky. Behind the kingdom of Jessin, Dongyi Junbai and Chao Kachin, who had originally gone to treat their wounds, could not help but walk out. They landed on the city walls and looked ahead. Their eyes were like lightning, as if they could see through the night and clearly see the scene in the distance. Even the heavily injured Tian Xing couldn't hold back his curiosity and came up to the city walls to watch the battle. They all wanted to see just how powerful the imperial protector of the Qin Empire was. They wanted to see just how powerful the imperial protector of the Qin Empire was. They wanted to see if he could really kill 5 Heaven Saint Masters by himself. Apart from them, countless generals of the kingdom of Jessin had also climbed up the city walls. They were all focused on the few specks of light in the night sky. Jianshun's body was like an arrow that had been released from a bow. He shot towards the 5 heaven Saint Masters that had already risen into the sky. His aura was like a rainbow as his killing, intense sword. Oomph. You dare to say such big words by yourself? You really don't know your place. A loud voice rang out from the other side. It was a heaven Saint Master from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. His voice was filled with disdain. Jianshun remained silent. His eyes flashed like lightning as his killing intent flickered. He shot towards the 5 heaven Saint Masters with a powerful aura. A layer of azure and violet sword chi shot out from his right hand. He wanted to end the battle quickly, so he used the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits right from the start. Only then would he be able to kill these heaven Saint Masters quickly. Since you want to die, we'll fulfill your wish. Another heaven Saint Master's voice rang out from the other side. Immediately, 2 of them took out their saint weapons and charged towards Jianshun. Below, countless soldiers had already forgotten about the enemies in front of them. They all looked up at the sky and focused on the battle in the distance. A battle between heaven Saint Masters could be said to be extremely exciting. To these ordinary soldiers, it was an irresistible attraction. This was because this was not only a battle of the peak, but also a clash of the strongest forces on both sides. Their victory or defeat would directly affect the final outcome of the battle. The 3 of them gathered together very quickly. The 2 heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom swung their saint weapons at Jianshun. They did not hold back at all. Jianshun stabbed out with the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits with lightning speed. The 2 saint weapons swelled and collided with each other. A surge of energy erupted as the 2 weapons collided, instantly engulfing the 2 heaven Saint Masters. The experts from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom did not know how powerful the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits were. The 2 heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom had suffered a great loss from the first clash. A 2-finger-sized hole had appeared in the saint weapons in their hands. Because of the saint weapons, the 2 heaven Saint Masters were also greatly affected. They both spat out a mouthful of blood as shock filled their faces. Taking advantage of their stupefaction, Jianshun struck out again. The origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits tore through the pitch-black night sky. Before one of the heaven Saint Masters could even recover from the shock of losing his saint weapon, Jianshun had already beheaded him. Jianshun then struck out with his left hand, striking the heaven Saint Master's forehead and dispersing his soul on the spot. At this moment, the other heaven Saint Master finally returned to his senses. Seeing the death of his companion, his face was filled with shock. He no longer dared to fight against Jianshun alone. He immediately flew back and yelled, "Let's go together. Be careful of his saint weapon. Don't take it head-on." Hearing their companions cry for help, the expressions of the 3 heaven Saint Masters who had originally planned on watching the battle from afar changed. However, they did not hesitate at all. The 3 of them struck out together, fighting against Jianshun with the 4 of them. Jianshun charged into the midst of the 4 heaven Saint Masters, constantly striking out with the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits. The dazzling azure and violet sword spirits illuminated the pitch-black night sky as he engaged in a great battle with the 4 heaven Saint Masters. However, the 4 of them now knew that they could not take the azure and violet sword chi head-on, so they did not dare to take Jianshun's attacks head-on. They all dodged, making it so that for a short period of time, Jianshun could not do anything to them. High Earth Tier Battle Skill, Whirlwind Annihilation. A shout suddenly rang out as one of the Heaven Saint Masters used an Earth Tier battle skill to attack Jianshun. Wild winds began to blow as a tornado suddenly formed surrounding Jianshun. Within the tornado, blades of wind began to form, revolving around Jianshun's body and cutting at him. Seeing that Jianshun had been restrained, the other 3 Heaven Saint Masters did not want to fall behind. They all used Earth Tier battle skills. High Earth Tier battle skill, Heavy Sword of the Earth. Third form of water manipulation technique, condensing water into ice. Fifth form of heavy sword technique, Void Piercing Sword. With 4 angry shouts, the 4 Heaven Saint Masters used their Earth Tier battle skills at the same time. A pressure that seemed to come from the heavens pressed down on Jianshan, locking him in place. Jianshan coldly snorted as a light flashed in his eyes. His mind controlled everything in the world. As soon as the tornado formed around him, it was forcefully controlled by Jianshan's powerful mind, stopping it in midair. Shortly after, the azure and violet sword spirits' origin energy rapidly surged, forcefully blocking the earth-tier battle skills of the three Heaven Saint Masters. Boom! Following an earth-shattering explosion, the surging energy shock waves wreaked havoc between the heavens and the earth, and then crazily rolled in all directions, mercilessly destroying everything in its path. Countless soldiers below were affected by the shock waves and suffered heavy casualties. The Hidden Dragon Kingdom's military camp suddenly became a mess. Quick, protect the city walls. Dongi Junbai's expression changed as he stood on the city walls. He immediately yelled out before joining hands with Chao Kachin to set up a defensive barrier to protect the damaged city walls. Right now, the city walls of this first-class city were completely unable to withstand the impact of such powerful waves of energy. Furthermore, the city walls were filled with people. Once they collapsed, the casualties would definitely be extremely heavy. Chapter 417. Just as Dongi Junbai and Chao Kachin were about to cast down a layer of energy to protect the wall, the violent shockwaves of energy surged toward them. The four Heaven Saint Masters had simultaneously used an Earth-tier battle skill, so the shockwaves of energy were extremely powerful. Coupled with the fact that they were not very far away, the barrier that Dongi Junbai and Chao Kachin had cast down shook violently, making it extremely difficult for them to maintain it. Although the two of them were Heaven Saint Masters, the area of the wall they were protecting was just too large. If Jianshan and the others were a little closer to the wall, they would not be able to withstand it. Even if the two of them worked together, they would not be able to protect the wall. As the five of them fought in the air, Jianshan and the four Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom were unable to withstand the powerful shockwaves of energy. Their bodies were constantly pushed back in the air. Although the shockwaves of energy did not pose much of a threat to them, they were still unable to stabilize their bodies due to the lack of support in the air. As the four Heaven Saint Masters flew back, they constantly coughed up blood. Their faces were pale, and they were already heavily injured. This was because the origin energy of the sword spirits had left a two-finger-sized hole in their saint weapons. Just what kind of power is that? It's actually so terrifying. Be careful. No matter what, don't clash with that mysterious power in his hands. The Heaven Saint Masters cried out in fear. Their gazes towards Jianshan were filled with deep dread. Jianshan's eyes flashed. At that moment, his eyes had completely turned into a purplish green. His left eye flashed with a purple light, while his right eye flashed with a green light. It looked extremely demonic, as if it was not the eyes of a normal person. Suddenly, the countless steel, crossbow bolts, and rocks of various sizes on the ground seemed to be controlled by a mysterious power. They all rose into the air and began to glow with a faint purplish-green light. They shot towards the Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom like moths to a flame. They moved as fast as lightning. The four experts from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom were still immersed in the shock of the destruction of their saint weapons. They did not expect such a strange attack from the ground to attack them. Caught off guard, several holes appeared in their bodies. Several streams of blood gushed out from their bodies, dyeing the sky red. The intense pain caused the four of them to emit a muffled groan from their throats at the same time. Immediately, their faces were filled with shock as they looked at the thing that was rapidly shooting towards them. Their expressions immediately became incomparably solemn. Damn it, what's going on? One of the experts could not help but curse. However, they did not hesitate at all, immediately flying high into the air. At the same time, Saint force surged out of their bodies, forming a barrier around them to block the attacks from below. When the fine steel crossbow bolts and countless rocks struck the energy barrier around them, the barrier began to violently tremble before slowly breaking apart. The barrier could only slow them down slightly. Earth Elemental Armor. An expert with Earth attributed Saint Force immediately roared out. The earth elemental energy in the surroundings rapidly gathered, forming an armor completely condensed from earth elemental energy around him. Its defense was extremely powerful, barely blocking the attack of the sword chi. Jianshun opened his left hand, and 3 crossbow bolts as thick as an arm immediately hovered in front of him. They shot towards the expert in the earth elemental armor with faint sword chi. Their speed was even faster, causing ear-piercing sounds as they tore through the air. The expert's ears twitched, and he immediately discovered that the 3 crossbow bolts were not ordinary. He immediately swung the saint weapon in his hand to block them. Ding! 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 With 3 clear sounds, the 3 crossbow bolts were sent flying by the expert. However, the powerful force from the crossbow bolts caused his body to sway slightly, causing him to uncontrollably retreat a certain distance. At this moment, the origin energy from the sword spirits in Jianshun's right hand rapidly shot over. With a flash of azure and violet light, it stabbed towards the expert's forehead, arriving before him in the blink of an eye. At such a close distance, the expert had no time to dodge at all. With no other choice, he could only brace himself and use his saint weapon to block the attack. When the two collided, a 2-finger-wide gap appeared on the expert's saint weapon once again. He spat out another mouthful of blood. The continuous damage to his saint weapon had caused his injuries to become even more severe, causing his battle prowess to plummet. Jianshun followed up with another attack. The origin energy of the sword spirits stabbed out once again, piercing his forehead and wiping out his soul on the spot. Jianshun's left hand shot out like lightning and took the spatial ring from the expert's hand. Afterwards, he immediately charged towards the other 3 Heaven Saint Masters. The origin energy from the sword spirits continuously stabbed out. Right now, he was using the origin energy as if it was the light wind sword from before. Pooh! Another Heaven Saint Master's neck was cut off and his head flew high into the air. A layer of elemental energy quickly condensed and wrapped around the head as it flew off into the distance. Heavy sword technique, 5th form, void piercing sword. Water manipulation technique, 3rd form, condensing water into ice. The remaining 2 Heaven Saint Masters once again used their Heaven Tier battle skills to attack Jianshun in order to buy time for the beheaded Heaven Saint Master to escape. A sliver of disdain appeared on Jianshun's face. The origin energy of the azulate sword spirits quickly stabbed out, blocking their attacks. At the same time, a crossbow bolt shot out from the ground with a faint azulate sword chi. It caught up to the fleeing head in the blink of an eye and directly pierced through it, destroying the soul and wiping out the Heaven Saint Master's soul. Boom! A violent explosion of energy erupted as the Earth Tier battle skills of the 2 Heaven Saint Masters collided with the origin energy of the sword spirits. Immediately, a powerful shock wave of energy erupted and swallowed the 3 Heaven Saint Masters. A gleam of light flashed through Jianshun's eyes. With a thought, several crossbow bolts shot up from below, shooting toward the 2 Heaven Saint Masters. At the same time, Jianshun began to glow with an azure light as dense wind elemental energy gathered around him. He then forcefully resisted the shock waves of energy as he rapidly approached the 2 Heaven Saint Masters. Taking advantage of the fact that they were blocking the incoming crossbow bolts, Jianshun cut off their heads with a swing of his sword, wiping out their souls. The 5 Heaven Saint Masters of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom had all died in battle. In the camp of the Kingdom of Jessen, Dongyi Junbai, Chao Kachin, and Tian Xing were all filled with shock. They stared at Jianshun floating in the night sky in shock and were speechless for a long time. After a while, Tian Xing finally let out a long sigh and murmured, "The Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire really is powerful. I never thought that he would be able to kill all 5 Heaven Saint Masters of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom in such a short amount of time. With such battle prowess, I'm afraid that even a 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master would be far inferior." Hearing this, Dongyi Junbai and Chao Kachin both sucked in a deep breath. The shock in their hearts had already reached a point of no return. They were extremely clear about Jinshin's background. He was not as old as they had imagined. Instead, he was a true youth, definitely not over 30 years old. I never thought that the Imperial Protector's strength would be so much greater than we expected. His talent is just too frightening. Chao Kachin's voice trembled as he spoke. Dongi Junbai also let out a sigh. Using a voice that only the two of them could hear, he said, "The Imperial Protector being able to become a Heaven Saint Master at such a young age is already shocking enough. But I never thought that his strength would be so great that he would be able to kill 5 Heaven Saint Masters in a row. Perhaps, before long, Sir Imperial Protector will become a true Saint Ruler. I really wonder how he cultivates." Dongi Junbai's eyes were filled with envy when he mentioned the 2 words, Saint Ruler. Jianshun hovered in the pitch-black night sky. With a wave of his hand, several space rings slowly flew up from below and landed in his hand. After taking the space rings, Jianshun expanded his soul to cover a radius of 15 kilometers. Finally, he found the commander of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom in a dense group of people. Chapter 4:18. Jinshin's body was enveloped by the azure wind element as he shot through the night sky like a streak of azure light, quickly flying toward the enemy commander. The expressions of the vice-generals beside the commander changed drastically when they saw Jinshin fly over. They cried out in a hurry, "Oh no, he's coming for the general. Protect the general. General, run." A few of the deputy generals exclaimed in shock. Then they surrounded the old man, who seemed to be in his 60s, and quickly escorted him to the back. The surrounding soldiers all returned to their senses as well. Even though the death of their Heaven Saint Masters was a huge blow to their morale, there was no lack of hot-blooded men among them. They all used their bodies to block the old general's path. Seeing the actions of these people, Jinshin's eyes revealed a sliver of disdain. The commanders were only Earth Saint Masters, so how could they protect the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's commander from a Heaven Saint Master? In the blink of an eye, Jinshin closed in on them. With a flick of his finger, streaks of azure and violet sword chi shot out from his fingertips, causing the Earth Saint Master deputies to become flustered and unable to fend for themselves. Jinshin took advantage of this opportunity to grab the old general by the shoulder and lift him up. He then quickly flew over the heads of the soldiers and headed towards the Jessin Kingdom's camp. Although there were many Earth Saint Masters in the army, they could not fight back against a Heaven Saint Master. They could only watch as their commander was taken away by Jinshin. They were all furious. When Jinshin landed on top of the dilapidated walls with the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's commander in tow, the soldiers of the Jessin Kingdom immediately let out heaven-shaking cheers. Each and every one of them had expressions of excitement on their faces. Many of them even had tears of joy flowing from their eyes. Due to the large difference in numbers and the disproportionate number of peak experts, the Kingdom of Jessin had been suppressed by the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's army for the past few days. They could only use their geographical advantage to fight back. They had originally thought that the Kingdom of Jessin would definitely lose this time, causing many of the soldiers to fall into despair. But who would have thought that in such a short amount of time, the situation would change so drastically? The 5 Heaven Saint Masters of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom had all been killed by their own experts, and even the enemy commander had been captured alive. How could the soldiers not be overjoyed? On the other hand, the soldiers of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom were all demoralized. They no longer had the will to fight. The Heaven Saint Masters were like a pillar of support to the ordinary soldiers. Now that their pillar of support had fallen, they no longer had the courage and fearlessness they had before. Even the generals were stupefied. Their eyes were empty. The death of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's 5 Heaven Saint Masters had already dealt a heavy blow to them. Now that their commander had been captured, they had no idea what to do next. Many of the generals gathered around the ruined walls. They all looked at Jinshin in admiration as they thanked him. Although Jinshin only seemed to be in his 20s, they were not naive enough to believe that Jinshin was only as young as he seemed. They all believed that Jinshin was a senior who had lived for hundreds of years. Although the old general of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom had been captured by Jinshin, His presence did not decrease at all. He glared at Jianshun and growled, "Imperial Protector? Just which kingdom's Imperial Protector are you? You actually dared to interfere with the matters of our 4 kingdoms. Are you not afraid that we'll flatten your kingdom?" The death of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's 5 Heaven Saint Masters had a huge impact on the overall strength of the kingdom. As a result, the old general's hatred for Jianshun was extremely strong. When the generals of the kingdom of Jesson heard this, their gazes were filled with ridicule. Their faces were filled with disdain. In front of the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great kingdoms, the 4 kingdoms were as weak as tofu, unable to withstand a single blow. Old General Su, you better show some respect in front of the esteemed Imperial Protector. Otherwise, the consequences of offending the Qin Empire are not something you can bear. A general coldly snorted. Hearing this, the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's old General Su's expression changed as he exclaimed, "Qin Huang Kingdom? Could it be the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great kingdoms of the Tian Yuan continent?" "That's right," the general who had spoken earlier said proudly. His face was filled with pride. The fact that the kingdom of Jesson was able to associate themselves with the Qin Empire was definitely a joyous occasion for them. Old General Su sneered. He did not believe it at all. "Don't try to scare me. Don't think that I don't know the background of the kingdom of Jesson. How could the kingdom of Jesson associate themselves with a powerful country like the Qin Empire? You're so naive to think that you can scare me with just 2 Heaven Saint Masters. Do you think that I, Su Yunfei, am a 3-year-old child?" The generals of the kingdom of Jesson were enraged. However, before they could do anything, Jianshun raised his hand to stop them. He said, "The enemy's Heaven Saint Masters are all dead. I'm sure you all know what to do next." The generals of the kingdom of Jesson did not dare to delay. They all nodded respectfully. Jianshun handed old General Su over to them. He then turned to Dongi Junbai and Chao Kachin and said, "Go and treat your wounds. Once you're healed, head to the southern fort immediately." "Yes, sir," Dongi Junbai and Chao Kachin replied respectfully. Their attitude towards Jianshun had changed drastically. Their respect came from the bottom of their hearts. It was completely different from before. What happened next had nothing to do with Jianshun. He had done what he needed to do. The rest was up to the generals. Jianshun returned to the inn that had been temporarily converted into a command post to rest. He closed the door tightly and forbade anyone from disturbing him. He blocked all the generals and leaders of the various factions who wanted to use this opportunity to make friends with him. That night, loud voices constantly rang out from the walls. The general stationed at the western fort of the kingdom of Jesson stood on the walls and gave a speech. They used their words to suppress the soldiers of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom and ordered them to surrender. On the other hand, the highest commander of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom was tied up like a dumpling and pressed against the walls by several experts. The death of 5 Heaven Saint Masters and the capture of their commander had caused the soldiers of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom to lose all morale. Their battle prowess had greatly decreased as well. In the end, after a discussion among the commanders, they decided to retreat. This was because they knew that they no longer had any Heaven Saint Masters on the front lines. Once the Heaven Saint Masters of the Kingdom of Jesson moved against the ordinary soldiers, they would not be able to stop them. Even the soldiers themselves would be killed. Jianshun's arrival had temporarily alleviated the dangerous situation in the western fort of the Kingdom of Jesson. Many of the generals were grateful and wanted to hold a feast for Jianshun, but they were firmly rejected by Jianshun. With the crisis temporarily resolved, the soldiers of the Kingdom of Jesson began to recuperate. A large number of craftsmen were sent out from the city to repair the damaged walls to prevent another attack from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. The next afternoon, Chao Kachin and Dongi Junbai finally recovered from their wounds with the help of several dozen Radiant Saint Masters. They immediately followed Jianshun's orders and left for the belt in the south. What happened next was extremely peaceful. Jianshun stayed there for 2 days, only leaving after Tianxing had completely recovered. Afterwards, he hurried towards the eastern fort as quickly as possible. The Hidden Dragon Kingdom only had 9 Heaven Saint Masters in total. 4 of them had died in the northern fort, and 5 had been slain by Jianshun. It could be said that the Hidden Dragon Kingdom's experts were all dead. As a result, Jianshun did not have to worry about the Hidden Dragon Kingdom sending more experts over. With Tian Xing, a Heaven Saint Master, guarding the fort was enough to deter an army of 1,000,000. The eastern fort was very far from the western fort, almost crossing the entire kingdom of Jessen's territory. It was over 10,000 kilometers away. Even with Jianshun's speed, it would take him 6 to 8 hours to get there. The eastern fort of the kingdom of Jessen had already been breached by the Blue Wind Kingdom. The army of the Blue Wind Kingdom pursued the deserters of the kingdom of Jessen deep into the kingdom of Jessen's territory. Jianshun flew for over 4 hours and only stopped when he was over 3,000 kilometers away from the eastern fort. This was because in a large city not far from him, a dozen or so Heaven Saint Masters radiating with elemental energy were engaged in a great battle. Ripples of energy shook the sky, causing it to darken. It was extremely intense. Jianshun looked over, as if he could see through space. He could clearly see what was happening a dozen kilometers away. His face then became extremely stern. There were a total of 15 people fighting, 11 against 4. Of the 4, 2 were people Jianshun knew. They were the principal of Kargath Academy, Kafir, and the imperial advisor of the Qin Empire, Xiao Tian. Although he did not know the other 2, it was obvious that they were from the kingdom of Jessen. The difference in numbers was just too great. The 3 Heaven Saint Masters from the kingdom of Jessen were heavily injured and covered in blood. Xiao Tian, on the other hand, was the most heavily injured out of the 4. His body was covered in countless terrifying wounds. There was even a hole in his chest that was bleeding profusely. He was completely covered in blood. Seeing this, Jianshun's eyes turned cold. His killing intent surged as a tremendous presence spread out in all directions. He then charged toward the battlefield. At the same time, countless rocks and sand floated into the air below the battlefield. They shot toward the 11 Heaven Saint Masters with the speed of lightning, relieving the pressure on the Heaven Saint Masters from the kingdom of Jessen. Imperial Protector. Xiao Tian immediately recognized Jianshun and smiled.